The story begins with a tense silence dominates the room as a trembling nobleman stands before Lisette Vander, his composure shattering under her icy scrutiny. The man, overwhelmed by the pressure, stammers her name while Lisette crosses her arms, her expression radiating a fierce, unyielding disapproval that labels him a wasteful person in her mind. She glares at him, noting with internal cynicism that every suitor uses the exact same phrasing when initiating this awkward conversation. The man falters, attempting to broach the subject of their arrangement, while Lisette mentally mocks the cruel irony of her situation. He finally musters the courage to propose that they consider the marriage proposal as never having happened, a suggestion he delivers with a nervous, sweating demeanor. Lisette accepts the dissolution of their engagement immediately, offering no resistance. Her abrupt compliance startles the man, eliciting a confused sound from him, but Lisette swiftly clarifies that she no longer minds the outcome. However, she refuses to let him escape without confronting the social reality of their status. She challenges him to voice his relief aloud if he is truly happy about the broken engagement, citing the strict class distinctions of their aristocratic society. The man averts his gaze, denying her accusation while sweating profusely, his body language betraying the relief he refuses to verbalize. Lisette observes this sixth failure with a weary resignation, reflecting that despite her genuine search for a partner, every engagement ends in this identical, humiliating fashion. She recalls her debut as the daughter of the Count of the Vander family, a time when she entered high society with hope. Yet, a pattern emerged where every suitor eventually retreated, claiming they were not worthy of someone like her. Lisette understands the political maneuvering behind these words. In their culture, it is taboo to withdraw a marriage proposal oneself, so these men manipulate her into refusing to save their own face. This recurring manipulation causes her to question if she is unknowingly committing some error, leaving her exhausted and conscious of her own perceived lack of charm. The root of this misery traces back to an evening party following her third broken engagement, where the brutal truth first came to light. In that memory, men stood in a grand hall, sipping wine and gossiping about her latest failed match. They discussed the arduous process of courtship, complaining that introduction letters rarely receive replies and that visiting rites are delayed, creating a disconnect between proposal and meeting. Lisette stood nearby, overhearing whispers questioning if the gossip was about her. A man approached her with a polite greeting, but behind her, the whispers continued, dissecting the reasons for the breakup. The gossipers marveled at how many men desired her, comparing her suitors to the number of stars, yet they ridiculed the idea that she cleared such difficult hurdles only to fail at the end. The conversation then took a sharp, revelatory turn as one man clarified the situation. The suitors were not rejected by the Academy or Lisette herself, but rather, they had proposed to the wrong woman entirely. The gossipers confirmed that there was another debutante named Lisette de Tar among the same group, a young lady who shared Lisette Vander's first name. The realization struck the group that the suitor had intended to propose to Lisette de Tar but had mistakenly directed his proposal to Lisette Vander. This revelation elicited gasps of shock from the nobleman, who could hardly believe such a blunder occurred. Memories of the debutante ball surface, visualizing a beautiful woman making a grand entrance that captivated every single nobleman in the hall. Lisette realizes that the suitors, entranced by this other woman, sent their proposals in a fervor, only to discover later that they had engaged themselves to the wrong person. Trapped by social etiquette, these men panicked and resorted to the "you are too good for me" excuse to extricate themselves from the accidental commitment without admitting their incompetence. The systemic cause of this confusion lies in the rigid courtship customs of their society. Noble young ladies are raised in seclusion and reveal their faces only once during their debut evening party. Following this single reveal, they hide their faces behind fans again, as it is considered improper for unmarried women to show their faces. A chart detailing the engagement process illustrates the perilous steps. First an exchange of letters, then a fan delivery where the woman hands a letter to the man while hiding her face, followed by conversation through the fan. The face is only revealed again at the fourth step, the face reveal and fan lowering, where the couple speaks directly. It is at this late stage that the men realize a completely different woman stands before them. The suitors, thinking they were progressing smoothly with the beauty they saw at the ball, are blindsided when Lisette lowers her fan. The gossipers at the party roared with laughter at this absurdity, noting that both women are countesses and even share the same hair color, making the mix-up plausible if the first letter was misdelivered. They mocked the situation, blaming hard-of-hearing coachmen and the similar names for the chaos. Their cruelty escalated as they speculated on Lisette Vander's appearance, rudely asking if she was truly that ugly and wondering why the suitor didn't write the full name on the letter. One man in the group admitted he thought Lisette was simply confident and optimistic, expecting her to be the one to dump the suitor. He laughed, describing the surprise not as opening a lid, but as the moment she closed her fan, finding his own wit hilarious. He conceded that the other Lisette was beautiful and possessed a sharp vibe, positioning her as the complete opposite of Lisette Vander. Lisette, having heard enough, approached the group with the sound of a clinking glass interrupting their laughter. She confronted the gossiper, asking if he found the reason for the mistake valid, noting the tension rising in his posture. She dismantled his defense, accusing him of believing he did nothing wrong while he actually misheard things on his own and spread baseless words. The man recoiled in terror as she loomed over him. He stammered, attempting to deflect by accusing her of comparing people to sharp blades, calling it a cruel thing to say. Lisette retorted effortlessly, labeling him a blunt weapon, and declaring them even, effectively silencing him. Retreating from the memory, Lisette sighs deeply, acknowledging her immaturity in that moment just a few months prior. Her maid, Toya, approaches, having watched the entire interaction with the latest suitor. Lisette admits she knew the engagement was doomed the moment the suitor used her full name, Lady Lisette, confirming he had realized the identity error. Toya chides her mistress for being so open and unguarded, reminding her of the fourth suitor who also caused a scene. Lisette recalls that incident, where she tried to correct a man who had the wrong person, only for him to vehemently deny the mistake to protect his pride as a marquis's son. Lisette explains to Toya that noblemen hate being told they are wrong. When she pointed out the error to the fourth suitor, he trembled and accused her of tricking him. The only way to resolve these situations without a massive uproar is for the man to realize the mistake and officially call it off himself. She expresses her exhaustion with the entire charade and prepares to report this latest failure to her father. In the Count's study, Lisette delivers the news that the engagement has been broken off again. Her father, Count Vander, collapses onto his desk in despair. He wails uncontrollably, demanding to know what could possibly be wrong with his adorable daughter who possesses beauty, charm, and brains. The maids in the background awkwardly suggest that perhaps the person themselves was the issue, trying to comfort the distraught father. Count Vander rages, wondering what kind of fool would be so disrespectful to his daughter. Lisette watches her father's tantrum, knowing that telling him the truth, that she was mistaken for someone else, would only cause a huge mess and hurt him further. She chooses silence, letting him believe in the vague injustice of it all. Her father, clutching his chest, declares that he won't give up and that a man who understands her true worth will definitely appear. Lisette internally disagrees, resigned to the belief that such a romance is impossible for someone like her who lacks the captivating charm of the other Lisette. 3 days later, the cycle threatens to repeat. Count Vander bursts into the room with a wide smile and a teacup in hand, announcing good news. A letter has arrived from a new suitor. Lisette recoils, asking if there is another one already, her tone flat and uninterested. She asks who it is from, expecting another disappointment. Her father proudly announces the name, Lord Lawless Visant, the young duke. He emphasizes the suitor's prestige, noting that he is the crown prince's second cousin and recently inherited his dukedom. The count continues to list the duke's attributes: a brilliant mind, exceptional looks, and outstanding leadership demonstrated by leading a cavalry expedition. Lisette listens with growing dread. The more she hears of his perfection, the more convinced she becomes that this is another mistake. Her father misinterprets her gloomy expression as dissatisfaction, asking why she looks so unhappy. Lisette grips her dress, thinking that the duke's popularity with society ladies makes it impossible for him to choose a lesser count's daughter like her. She attempts to argue that the letter itself is the problem, insisting that a mistake has occurred. She explains the flaw in the system to her father. Proposal letters often omit the recipient's name and are delivered by butlers directly to the household, creating ample room for delivery errors. She laments that without this strange custom, these painful misunderstandings wouldn't happen. She wonders how many servants have been scolded for delivering letters to the wrong house. Her father tries to soothe her, calling her by her childhood nickname, Lisa. Resigned to her duty, Lisette agrees to accept the letter, though she asks him to stop using the nickname now that she is 18. Lisette takes the letter, observing the beautiful handwriting and the surprisingly modest tone of the self-introduction within. It contrasts sharply with the arrogance of her previous suitors. However, her mind drifts to the memory of seeing Duke Lawless Visant at the debutante ball. He stood apart from the crowd, his nobility evident even from afar, politely declining invitations from other ladies. Convinced that a man of his stature would never intentionally propose to her, she decides she must make him realize his mistake quickly. She resolves to save him the wasted time and herself the inevitable humiliation, believing that allowing this to proceed would be a true shame. Toya, the maid, stands before her mistress with news that defies the standard pace of courtship, confirming that a reply has already arrived. Lisette questions the immediacy of this response, her skepticism evident as she wonders if the suitor is merely impatient. Toya clarifies that the Duke wrote the reply on the very spot where she delivered the initial letter, showcasing an urgency that borders on desperation. Lisette receives the letter, her expression guarded, while Toya giggles, suggesting that the Duke must be eager to meet her mistress soon. As Lisette scans the parchment, her eyes widen at a specific request within the text. Toya leans in, noting that the Duke wishes to call her by a nickname if permitted. Lisette reads the specific name, Lisa, written in the letter. While she acknowledges that requesting a nickname is not entirely unusual for a first letter, the specific choice of Lisa strikes a nerve. Dread washes over her as she interprets this as a confirmation of her worst fears. She suspects he has once again mistook her for the other Lisette, leading to this familiar nonsense. Toya attempts to maintain optimism, but Lisette asks if this means the error has repeated itself. Lisette sighs, resigning herself to the pattern of failure, noting that even a man rumored to be intelligent makes the same mistakes as all the others. She dismisses Lord Lawless entirely, stating that he falls outside her interests. Toya counters this apathy, arguing that it is actually the opposite situation. The maid posits that it is easier to warm up to someone if they possess a few imperfections. Lisette concedes this point, admitting that when a person is too perfect at everything, their presence becomes intimidating. Toya reminds Lisette that she previously stated she is not good with men who are too perfect, reinforcing why the Duke's flawless reputation serves as a barrier. Memories of the Duke's social standing surface, painting a picture of an unapproachable figure. Lisette recalls rumors that he remained single and held no interest in women. She remembers his too perfect appearance and the air of distance he maintained, which made him impossible to approach. It struck the society as strange when he suddenly began attending evening parties. Because of this history, Lisette felt she couldn't even approach him. Lisette questions the logistics of his affection, noting that it is nearly impossible to set one's sights on a specific woman before her debut. Toya offers a romantic theory, suggesting he was eagerly waiting for Lisette's debut specifically. However, Lisette remains skeptical, viewing his sudden attendance and proposal as too much of a coincidence. Toya explains the societal laws that govern their interactions. Boys and girls are raised separately once they turn 10 to prevent political and child marriages between families. This rule strictly forbids meeting the opposite sex until the debut evening party. Lisette rationalizes that if they knew each other before turning 10, a connection wouldn't be impossible. Yet, she remains convinced the letter was sent to her by mistake. She insists on calling off the engagement quickly, believing it is better for both parties. She argues that the other Lady Lisette was so well known that rumors circulated even before her debut, making it plausible he knew her and not the protagonist. Lisette prioritizes the Duke's dignity, stating that a capable Duke must possess a great deal of pride. She aims to resolve the misunderstanding rapidly so he can withdraw early without humiliation. Toya, however, refuses to let Lisette give up so easily. She warns her mistress that if she takes things too easy, her prime will pass her by in no time. The maid argues that it is better to elicit a "what a waste" reaction from a suitor than for Lisette to make careless, self-deprecating remarks. Toya suddenly becomes fired up, urging Lisette to do her best. Toya shivers with conviction, declaring that there is definitely a gentleman out there who will understand Lisette's charm. In a moment of self-reflection, Lisette recites the rumors about herself compared to the other Lisette. She describes the other girl as sharp-tongued, man-faced, and clever. She contrasts this with the reputation of Miss Lisette, who is adored by commoners for her bold and assertive personality. Lisette accepts the insult, admitting that the man-faced description is true. Toya vehemently objects, begging her mistress not to take the rude words of an ex-fiancé at face value. Lisette remarks that she is 18 and hasn't cried in years. Toya attempts to compliment her, stating that even her crying face commands fierce loyalty, resembling a Lord Q. Toya continues her praise, mentioning that Lisette's tear-shaped mole is absolutely charming. The conversation shifts to a peculiar childhood habit as Toya asks Lisette not to talk about the biting thing. Toya insists that to her, Lisette is still a cute 18-year-old, remembering how she used to adorably chew on Toya's hand. A flashback reveals the reality of this adorable habit. A young Lisette is shown biting Toya and other maids, leaving teeth marks as her mark. Lisette considers this a terrible habit, noting that she didn't seem like a noble lady at all. However, the maids in the memory are shown arguing over who received the prettiest bite mark. They proudly showed off the marks, claiming they were proof of being loved by Lisette. Toya smiles nostalgically at the memory, noting that they were all quite happy about it. Lisette reflects on her nickname, realizing she used to call herself Lisa around her family because she couldn't speak properly back then. She finds it strange that Lord Lawless would use a nickname he shouldn't even know. This reinforces her suspicion that he is mistaking her for someone else. Despite her doubts, she resolves to live up to the expectations of her father and Toya, who always encourage her. Lisette commands Toya to prepare for the suitor's visit, instructing that she wishes to deliver the next letter through the door. She tells Toya that all she can do is what she is capable of. Toya affirms her support, believing that a man who understands Lisette's worth will definitely come along. Lisette holds onto a sliver of belief that someone will come someday. The very next day, the atmosphere shifts abruptly as Duke Lawless Visant arrives. Lisette panics, feeling that this is way too fast. She observes his perfectly handsome face and noble presence, overwhelmed that he visited the day after receiving her reply. Toya suggests that perhaps he is employing a tactic to make her anxious, citing the battle between men and women. Lisette dismisses the game playing, feeling she just needs to get it over with quickly. However, she freezes, unable to move because of the impact of Lord Lawless's face. She notes that just by standing there, women would constantly propose to him. Lisette peeks through the door, observing the Duke. She whispers that he shouldn't look so happy, as she is only going to make him sad later. She notices he is dressed formally, as if going to the royal castle. Lisette senses a difference in him compared to other fiancés. She considers ending the charade immediately to get scolded right from the start. Steeling herself, Lisette acknowledges she has come this far and there is no turning back. She takes a deep breath, realizing the only way is forward. The door clicks and creaks open. Duke Lawless Visant looks at her, his face flushed with emotion. He gazes at her hand, declaring that he is truly happy to see her noble hand with his own eyes. He calls it a beautiful hand. Lisette slides her hand through the opening, and the Duke reacts with a gasp. He trembles, overwhelmed by the sight. He struggles to contain his emotions, stating he can't take it. He touches her hand, causing Lisette to twitch in surprise. He apologizes immediately but follows up by complimenting her voice as beautiful. He urges her to accept the letter quickly. The Duke presses his face against her hand, closing his eyes in reverence. He whispers a plea to stay like this for just a bit longer. He murmurs, at last, indicating a long wait. Lisette wonders if such touch is forbidden at this stage of courtship. The Duke confesses that he has finally made it this far. The sound of their heartbeats punctuates the silence. Finally, the Duke pulls away, admitting it is hard to leave. He decides to end the visit for the day but promises to return at the same time tomorrow. As he departs, Lisette is left clutching her hand, sensing that this situation could become dangerous if it continues. She reflects on the encounter, feeling as if he truly desired her. She focuses on the lingering sensation of his hand, noting that it was so warm. Lisette admits to herself that even if it is an illusion, the feeling was real enough to make her happy. The morning sun bathes the Vander estate in a soft light, illuminating the grandeur of the mansion the day after the door handoff incident. Inside, Lisette stands paralyzed, clutching a bouquet of flowers so massive it obscures her vision. Her grip tightens around the stems as she processes the logistical impossibility before her. She realizes that the Duke intends to meet her face to face, a deduction driven by the sheer physical reality that the bouquet is far too large to pass through the narrow gap of a cracked door. The floral arrangement serves as a calculated Trojan horse, forcing her to abandon her defensive barrier and open the door fully to receive it. She stares at the flowers, her mind racing with the implications of this forced proximity. Moments later, the sound of a whoosh announces Duke Lawless Visant's arrival, his cape settling as he stands on the other side of the entrance. He offers a polite greeting, but Lisette's internal state is far from composed. She resolves to end this quickly, feeling the pressure of his expectations weighing heavily on her nerves. She determines to employ a strategy similar to her previous attempts. She will subtly give him a hint to trigger the realization that she is not the woman he seeks. A pang of guilt strikes her chest, manifesting as a physical pain, as she feels she is actively deceiving him by allowing this charade to continue even for a moment. With a deep breath, she unlocks the barrier, the door creaking and sliding open with a heavy clunk, to reveal her form. She steels herself, prioritizing the need to make him realize his mistake early on. Lisette executes her plan immediately, altering her vocal cords to produce a sound that is decidedly unladylike. She praises him as the highly reputed Duke, using a fake, deep, and raspy voice that scrapes against the air. Internally, she screams the word fake to emphasize the performance. She greets him formally as Duke Vicente, maintaining the gravelly tone. Lawless recoils slightly, his composure cracking as he stammers, questioning the sound coming from her throat. Lisette doubles down, claiming this raspy timbre is her secret technique, a blatant lie designed to repel him. Lawless attempts to be polite, asking if there is something wrong with her voice, but Lisette deflects, asking if he has already picked up on the hint, hoping he will interpret her voice as a fatal flaw in her elegance. Lawless denies this, stating, "Not at all," though his expression betrays confusion. Internal narration reveals the lengths Lisette went to for this sabotage. She spent the early morning hours singing multiple songs loudly enough to echo through the mansion, desperately ruining her voice solely for this encounter. She admits she has never heard the real Miss Lisette's voice, but she gambles on the certainty that a noble lady would not sound this raspy. She mentally urges him to figure it out, to see through the facade and leave. Lawless, however, gazes at her with deep concern, his hand covering his mouth as he wonders if the person before him is truly who he thinks she is, asking, "Why that kind of voice?" The situation escalates into chaos as Lawless interprets her ruined voice as a severe medical emergency. He flaps his hand in a panic, shouting for someone to get a doctor, convinced she has caught a terrible cold. Lisette realizes her plan has backfired spectacularly. She waves her fan frantically, pleading with him to wait and insisting she is fine. She denies the illness, her heart throbbing with anxiety. She knows that if a doctor is called now, she will die not of sickness, but of sheer embarrassment. She begs for a moment to calm down, trying to de-escalate the Duke's frantic concern. Lawless looks at her with intense worry, asking if she is really okay. Lisette worries about the repercussions from her staff, fearing she will be scolded again and told, "I told you not to get so worked up this morning." Lawless relaxes slightly, stating he is glad to hear she is not distraught, but he requests to accompany her, like this, unwilling to part ways immediately. Lisette notes his forwardness, observing that every single one of his expressions throws her heart into disarray. She stammers a confirmation that she is okay, but the tension remains palpable. She reflects on the norms of courtship, noting that typically a first meeting ends with a simple greeting and the scheduling of a subsequent visit. However, Lawless defies convention again. He steps closer, asking to spend a little more time with her. Lisette hesitates, stammering his title, Duke Vicente, but he interrupts her. Standing against a backdrop of clouds and falling petals, Lawless makes a request that bridges the distance between them. "Please, call me Lawless." Lisette nods, thanking him and stating she is truly happy, though she accidentally slips up and uses her normal voice for a split second before catching herself. Lawless continues, suggesting they head to the gazebo visible in the garden. Lisette sighs internally, admitting defeat. She finds herself unable to refuse him when his eyes, which she compares to jewels, stare at her so intensely. She agrees, understood, and allows him to escort her. As they walk, she notes his smooth escorting skills, asking where they shall go. The walk to the gazebo reveals Lawless's attentiveness. Lisette stares at him, feeling the weight of his intense gaze even as they move. She notices that walking with him is significantly easier compared to previous suitors because he is exceptionally good at matching her pace. Despite the romantic atmosphere, Lisette remains committed to her sabotage. She decides it is time for the next tactic. She recalls a courtship technique involving a fan that signifies, "just for you." She adapts this into her own secret technique, sliding her fan down to reveal a beauty mark situated by her eye. She praised this physical detail, likely a flaw in her mind or a differentiator from the other Lisette, will repel him. The reaction is instantaneous and catastrophic for her plans. Lawless clutches his chest, groaning as if struck by a physical blow. He begs her not to give him such a seductive glance, completely misinterpreting her gesture. Lisette is baffled, internally screaming, "Huh? Seductive look?" and denying that was her intention. Lawless stares at her, stunned, admitting he has never heard of Lady Lisette having a beauty mark. He demands to notice it now, his fascination growing rather than diminishing. Lisette realizes this is a problem. He interprets the reveal as a provocation. Lawless confesses that he won't be able to hold back much longer if he sees such a beautiful glance again, proving Lisette's theory that men tend to interpret things in their favor. Lawless's demeanor shifts from charmed to possessive. He asks a dangerous question, "Do you act like that with other men too?" Lisette feels the trap snapping shut. Being asked directly about other men flusters her. She answers honestly, admitting that it is true there are men who visit her. Lawless acknowledges the rumors that many men visit her, his expression darkening. He looms over her, his presence overwhelming as he says, "I see, and is that so?" The maid, Toya, watches from the sidelines, observing that the plan did not go well and noting that the intensity of Lord Lawless's feelings for Miss Lisette is not normal. Toya retreats, telling them to enjoy their time, realizing she can do nothing to stop this momentum. A sudden breeze sweeps through the garden, chilling the air. Lisette shivers, insisting she is fine, but Lawless acts immediately. He removes his coat and commands her, "Here, please wear this." He slides the garment over her shoulders with a heavy thud. When she hesitates, he warns, "If you won't wear it," implying consequences she dares not test. Lisette acquiesces, stammering that it's enough, but he pulls the coat tighter around her. She notes the coat looks high-class. Lawless stares at her, and she promises to wear it right away. He pulls her close, stating that if she wears it, she will have to stay in his arms. Lisette finds herself wrapped in his warmth, the coat so big it swallows her, and she registers his refined scent. He asks gently if that is still all right with her. Toya interrupts the intimacy by arriving with a tea service. Lisette, flustered, accepts the cup. She takes a sip and immediately chokes, mentally screaming, "Bitter?" and wondering what on earth she is drinking. She looks at Toya, unable to tell if the maid is good at her job or completely oblivious to the mood. Lawless, sipping his own cup, asks if something is wrong, claiming the tea is delicious. Lisette forces a smile, denying any issue while internally questioning her sanity. Toya smirks in the background, a V sign over her head, revealing her scheme. "Yours is a tea that's good for your throat, my lady." The bitter concoction was a medicinal brew to cure the raspy voice Lisette had feigned. The remedy works instantly. Lisette speaks, and Lawless notes with a smile that her voice seems to have recovered. He expresses his relief, saying, "I'm glad," while Lisette hides her recovered voice behind her fan, feeling outmaneuvered by her own staff. She affirms, "Yes," accepting the defeat of her voice disguise tactic. As the sky turns to the colors of dusk, Lawless notes that it is already evening. He expresses his reluctance to part, stating he hates to leave but must do so soon. He remarks that Lisette seems well accustomed to being escorted, a comment that makes Lisette gasp, "Ha," in surprise. She denies this internal accusation as he slips his hand away from hers. Just as he prepares to depart, Lawless drops a question that freezes Lisette in place. "Up until now, how many kisses have you received?" Lisette stares at him, her mind blanking at the audacity and intimacy of the inquiry. She counts silently, 5? 54? Her thoughts scrambling. She looks at his eyes, realizing they are burning with jealousy again. She attempts to address him formally as Duke Visant, but he corrects her sharply, "It's Lawless." Lisette reflects on her past experiences, noting she has had her hand taken through gloves as a parting gesture before, but never directly on her bare skin. Lawless defies this boundary. He takes her hand, his lips touching her fingertips. Lisette feels the shock of the contact, noting his lips are so warm. A terrifying thought crosses her mind, that she is going to be devoured by Lord Lawless, starting from her fingertips. Lawless pulls back, leaving Lisette breathless. He issues a promise that sounds almost like a threat, "I will come to see you again very soon, before this mark fades." He refers to the sensation of his kiss on her hand, a phantom mark of his possession. Lawless departs, leaving Lisette alone in the garden. She grips her fan tightly, her knuckles white. She tells herself she has to get a grip. Standing tall in her gown, holding the massive bouquet, she reaffirms her identity. Despite the overwhelming assault of the Duke's affection and the failure of her sabotage attempts, she declares to herself, "I am Lisette Vander, after all." She accepts the challenge, silently vowing to be waiting for him, Lord Lawless. Lisette steels herself, acknowledging internally that she possesses no alternative but to deploy every tactical card currently in her hand. She recognizes that the man she faces is unlike any other suitor she has previously encountered. The gravity of the situation weighs upon her as she realizes Lord Lawless holds a distinct obsession with Lisette, forcing her to resort to extreme measures. Her mind flashes back to a physical sensation, recalling the bite mark that has mostly faded from her skin. A sharp sound snaps her back to the present reality, and she executes a formal salute to compose herself. Memory overtakes her as she touches her neck, her cheeks flushing with a sudden, intrusive warmth. She questions what on earth she is remembering at such a critical moment. The sensory memory is vivid. She recalls that his lips were incredibly warm against her skin. This recollection disorients her, causing her to stutter and gasp slightly. She swiftly recalibrates, deciding that for the current encounter, it is still far too premature to lower the fan that obscures the lower half of her face. She maintains her guard, hiding her expression behind the folding fan. Lord Lawless sits on the terrace bench, his posture relaxed yet attentive as Lisette approaches him. She apologizes for keeping him waiting, to which he responds instantly, denying any inconvenience. He greets her warmly and she returns the greeting. Lawless confesses that waiting for her was a blissful time in itself and expresses his genuine happiness to see her. Lisette observes him, calculating that he definitely will not realize that she is, in fact, Lisette. She reflects on her previous tactical failure, where the raspy voice strategy ended without success, but she remains committed to her new plan. Implementing her new tactic, Lisette speaks in the third person, declaring that Lisette is also happy to meet Lord Lawless. Lawless responds with a simple affirmative. Internally, Lisette confirms this is the refer to myself in first person as Lisette strategy. She forces an aura of delight, believing that even he must notice the peculiarity of this behavior. Despite her outward confidence in the strategy, she admits internally that the act is incredibly embarrassing to perform. Lawless gently calls her Liz. Ignoring the intimacy, she continues her performance, mentioning the bouquet Lord Lawless kindly gave Lisette the other day. She elaborates that she has it displayed in her room and admires it every day. The act begins to wear on her mental fortitude, and she screams internally that she cannot take it anymore. Lawless simply smiles, a radiant and calm expression on his face. Desperate to maintain the charade, she adds that Lisette also loves reading books. She lists her activities during their time apart, stating that Lisette spent her time doing embroidery and reading. She creates a montage of domestic tranquility, describing books and needlework. Lawless engages with her fabricated persona, asking what kind of books she is interested in. Lisette wonders if love has not only blinded him but also made him hard of hearing, as he seems unperturbed by her strange speech patterns. She stammers slightly, then answers that Lisette reads books about plants and such. She admits that there were parts she did not understand, so she sometimes asked her tutor for clarification. She specifies that she found books on medicinal herbs particularly interesting. Lawless listens intently, affirming her words. Lisette continues, noting that lately, she has been able to read them by herself. Lawless expresses admiration, noting that reading such difficult books on medicinal herbs on her own is impressive. He prompts her to give an example of the new things she has discovered. Lisette hesitates, repeating the phrase, for example. Lawless compliments her, calling her very hardworking. Lisette blushes deeply behind her fan, modestly deflecting that she simply enjoys discovering new things. Lisette's mind races with a specific fact she learned. She explains that one of the herbs commonly taken for pain relief was recently found to cause skin inflammation when taken too frequently. She warns him that if one keeps using that herb thinking it is safe as usual, something terrible might happen because of it. As she speaks, anxiety spikes within her. She realizes she might have flaunted her knowledge too aggressively. She worries that she has done it now and might have hurt a man's pride. She believes this conversation is supposed to be the man's place to show off, and she fears Lord Lawless must be offended. Lawless looks at her, his expression unreadable for a moment, causing Lisette to flinch. Contrary to her fears, he tells her that her explanation is very enlightening. He admits that it is the first time he has heard that information. He praises her, stating she is quite a smart person, very different from the rumors. He finds her studious and thoughtful, calling her truly charming. He emphasizes that she is not just beautiful and kind, but that her stories are also interesting. Lisette is stunned by the compliment, letting out a confused sound. The atmosphere softens as Lawless gazes at her affectionately. He urges her to please continue. Lisette, flustered and touched, agrees. She decides to tell him the story she read last night. As she speaks, she describes a feeling of wanting to cry over something so small. Rain begins to fall around them, indicated by the sound of droplets hitting the garden. Lawless notices the weather shift first, remarking that it is raining. Lisette realizes she didn't even notice the change in weather. Lawless agrees, noting the rain has started. He observes that he cannot go back in this weather. Lisette realizes that Lord Lawless was listening to her story so intently that he was completely absorbed. She notes that he seemed to enjoy it so much. So much time had passed during their conversation that a puddle has formed on the ground. Lisette moves to call for assistance, stating she will have the maid at the entrance bring an umbrella. Lawless intervenes, telling her that won't be necessary. He stops her movement with a gentle sound. He looks out at the precipitation and calls it a blessed rain. Lisette is confused by his reaction. Lawless interprets the rain as if the heavens themselves are granting him permission to spend more time with her. He asks if she could spare him her time until the rain stops. Lisette feels a warmth spread through her entire body at his words. Internally, she pleads for just a little longer. She registers the physical sensation that he touched her again, noting that his hand is so warm. The scene shifts to the exterior of the mansion at night, the rain having ceased. Lisette confesses to herself that the feeling is swirling inside her so intensely it is almost maddening. Back inside the mansion, Lisette's maid, Toya, observes her mistress while brushing her hair. Toya remarks that, "My lady, is in quite a good mood today." Toya notes that the rain has stopped and asks if something happened. Lisette giggles softly. She explains that Lord Lawless was just so. Her mind drifts back, remembering what happened this afternoon. In her memory, they are preparing to part ways. Lawless expresses concern, saying he cannot let her catch a cold. Lisette thanks him profusely for the day. Lawless admits that as much as he hates to leave, he must. Lisette stammers a denial, seemingly wanting to prolong the moment. Lawless confesses he was really happy that she listened to him, or perhaps that he listened to her. He states that the one who is grateful to meet is him. As they walk towards the gate, Lawless steps directly into the water. Splashing sounds echo as he walks. Lisette notices he is quiet and wonders if she said something unnecessary. She points out the puddle to him, warning him of the water. Lawless continues walking, his boots soaking wet. Lisette panics, asking if he is okay and offering to call a maid right away. Lawless refuses, his face flushing red. He covers his face with his hand, begging her to stop because it is too embarrassing. Back in the present, Toya recounts the event while brushing Lisette's hair. Toya notes that letting him go home like that, soaked, was a concern. Lisette insists it was fine. Toya reveals that Lord Lawless was blushing. Toya explains that when Lisette commented that he looked so serious, he told Toya he was trying hard to keep a straight face. He had admitted that seeing Lisette's smile made him so happy he got a little carried away. He was glad that Lisette didn't get dirty. Toya concludes that he really is an interesting person. She adds that even afterward he looked like he was having trouble walking to the carriage. Toya then gently teases her mistress, asking if she is falling for the Duke. Lisette vehemently denies it, saying, "Surely not that." Toya giggles and asks, "What's this?" referring to Lisette's reaction. Lisette stammers, asking what Toya is saying and insisting there is no way that is true. Toya points out Lisette's face. Lisette touches her own cheek, confused. Toya observes that she looks just like someone in love. A heartbeat sound effect, Dokken, resonates within Lisette. A memory of Lawless surfaces, where he asks her for another promise. He promises that before the mark disappears, he will come to see her again. He vows that as long as his lady is happy, that is all that matters to him. In the present, Lisette sits before her vanity mirror. She whispers a quiet request to herself, or perhaps to him, to please make sure he doesn't get hurt again. The scene closes with a soft sound as she lowers her hands, leaving her with a startled realization. The atmosphere within the chamber tightens with anticipation as the announcement rings out that Duke Visant has arrived. Lisette stands by the window, her composure fraying as she fidgets nervously with her hands, the rustle of her dress betraying her internal agitation. The sound of the door handle clicking echoes sharply in the silence, signaling the moment of truth. The maid, Toya, enters and respectfully addresses her mistress, causing Lisette to jolt in surprise before hastily composing herself. Lisette smooths her skirts with a soft shuffle of fabric, announcing that she will be right there, steeling herself for the encounter. Toya surveys Lisette's appearance and declares that she looks absolutely wonderful. Seeking reassurance, Lisette questions if that is truly the case, her insecurity bubbling to the surface as she asks if today's dress looks strange. Toya dismisses the worry with a confident smile, urging her mistress that it is time to go. Lisette steps out into the garden to join Lord Lawless, the sunlight filtering through the trees as they walk side by side. Internally, Lisette admits that ever since their last meeting, a strange sensation has taken hold of her. She recalls Toya's previous observation, that she looks like someone in love, and finds herself weirdly nervous because those words now echo in her mind. She observes Lawless discreetly. When he looks away, she feels a pang of loneliness, yet she simultaneously admires how wonderful he appears. However, when he turns his gaze back to her and smiles, happiness surges through her. She realizes that her body and heart feel impossibly light, as if she could simply float away into the sky. The realization crystallizes in her mind. This sensation must be love. Their conversation drifts to botany, and Lisette questions him eagerly about a plant, asking for its name, its effects, and the color of its flowers. She mentions finding a strangely shaped leafy plant in the garden, noting that the gardener identified it as a medicinal weed. Lawless watches her animated expression with a soft, affectionate gaze, murmuring the name, Lisa. He quickly catches himself, apologizing for getting carried away. Lisette freezes, her mind instantly rejecting the possibility that he simply forgot propriety. She dissects the way he smiles at her and talks to her, concluding with a heavy heart that he treats her this way because he believes she is Lisette, a specific person from his memories. The weight of this misunderstanding causes her body to suddenly feel leaden. Lawless attempts to explain his slip of the tongue, stating that the way she asked questions so curiously felt nostalgic, causing him to use the nickname without thinking. He admits that even in his letters, he wasn't allowed to call her that yet. Lisette latches onto the word, nostalgic, confusion clouding her thoughts. Lawless presses on, assuming she shares this memory, asking if she remembers that he used to call her that back then. Lisette's internal monologue reveals a disconnect. She suspects he has met someone named Lisa before, as she has no memory of these events. Lawless gazes into the distance, recounting that she was only 5 years old at the time. He explains the custom where boys and girls are separated once they turn 7, meaning that by the time he turned 10, they could no longer see each other. He recalls vividly how her eyes used to sparkle brightly as she asked him all sorts of questions, describing her as his light. He remembers her asking why a flower was a certain color or what words in a picture book meant. This drive to answer Lisa's questions motivated him to become someone great. He confesses that upon seeing her again, grown into a beautiful woman, he fell in love a second time. Lisette listens, but his words sting her deeply. She realizes that Lord Lawless was eagerly waiting for a reunion with a specific person, and all she can manage in response is a dry, strained smile. Lawless continues, mentioning that when she appeared as a debutante, he heard rumors that marriage proposals were flooding in for her. He admits that while it couldn't be helped, it was frustrating for him. He explains that right after her debut, he was deployed on an expedition to the front lines in place of the Crown Prince. Unable to sit still, he wrote letter after letter from the battlefield. He wonders aloud if they got lost among the letters from other men, speculating on the volume of correspondence she must have received. Lisette stiffens, realizing that something that shouldn't have arrived, or rather, never did, is being discussed. She confirms internally that she has no memory of receiving a single letter from Lord Lawless. Lawless rationalizes the silence, assuming the courier he entrusted the delivery to failed to fulfill his duties diligently. Lawless then drops a crucial detail. He remembers them playing together a lot at this estate, as she was often invited here. He looks at her with a mix of hope and confusion, asking if she really does not remember. The realization hits Lisette with crushing force. She knew from the beginning that the one Lord Lawless truly seeks is Lisette de Tar, the girl from his memories, not her. She corrects him, revealing that her family only moved to this mansion last year. She explains that her father purchased the estate recently and that it originally belonged to another noble family. Lawless stops, stunned, asking if he was remembering it wrong. Lisette confirms the painful truth to herself. No matter how she looks at it, she is not the Lisa that Lord Lawless is seeking. She asks him to please refrain from calling her Lisa for now. Desperate to escape the suffocating situation, she abruptly declares that she must end their meeting for the day. She lies, claiming she just remembered an urgent matter. Lawless attempts to extend the interaction, offering to at least walk her to the entrance. Lisette recoils, shouting, "No." She points to the sky, claiming it looks like it might rain, and urges Lord Lawless to return home immediately. Internally, She screams that she does not want Lord Lawless to see her troubled expression right now. Lawless accepts her dismissal but pivots to a new request before leaving. He states he will go home for today but asks if she would come with him to tomorrow's masquerade ball at the royal castle. Lisette hesitates, noting she received an invitation but believes attending might be difficult. She explains she hasn't prepared a mask for the ball. Lawless counters immediately, offering to prepare the mask for her. He explains that since she doesn't have an official fiancé, she would need to wear a mask to attend, and if she accepts his escort, it would become the most wonderful ball for him as well. He emphasizes that as long as she has the mask, she can attend. Lisette processes the gravity of the offer. She understands that an escort by Lord Lawless is essentially a public declaration, a proposal. She realizes she is almost accepting it despite the deception. Lawless confirms that the implications are exactly why he is inviting her. Lisette walks away, her footsteps heavy on the stone path. She thinks that he needs to say something like, "What a waste," when he realizes the truth. She prays for him to realize the mistake quickly if the invitation was meant for the other Lisa. She worries that if she goes out in public like this, she will end up embarrassing Lord Lawless when the truth comes out. Yet, a selfish desire takes root. She finds herself wishing that the moment of revelation would come just a little later. She resolves to embrace the role of the deceiver. She decides that even a fleeting moment of happiness is enough. She determines that if she gets exposed, she wants people to believe she deceived him knowingly from the start, so that he is spared the humiliation. With a quiet resolve, she answers, "Understood." She mentally thanks him, grateful for the chance to spend this time being loved by him, even if it is a lie. Lawless confirms he will come to pick her up in the afternoon by carriage. Left alone, Lisette stares at her hand. She confesses to herself that she wants to remain Lisette just a little longer. A wave of unbearable loneliness washes over her as she gazes at her ring finger, which remains bare without a promise ring. Lisette stands in the grand hallway of the manor, her arms outstretched in a frantic, desperate attempt to physically barricade the path of the older man before her. Her father, dressed in formal attire, bustles past her with a chaotic energy, insisting that he must leave immediately to greet Duke Visant. Lisette stammers, trying to interject, but her father brushes off her concerns, misinterpreting her agitation as worry for his schedule rather than a plea to stop. He assures her he is fine and promises they can speak leisurely later, citing the arrival of guests as his priority. As he strides away, ignoring her outstretched hand, Lisette cries out that there is something she needs him to confirm. He does not slow his pace, throwing back a hasty apology and an instruction to send his regards to the Duke before disappearing down the corridor. Left alone in the wake of his departure, Lisette retreats behind a large door, peeking out with a guarded expression. She admits to herself that she is relieved her father had a scheduled guest, as a direct face-to-face meeting between him and Lord Lawless would be catastrophic. She understands that Lord Lawless would instantly realize her father is Count Vander, a revelation she is desperate to avoid. Clutching her fan tightly, she resolves to delay this discovery, even if only for a little longer, or at least until the upcoming ball concludes. A wave of self-deprecation washes over her as she acknowledges the ridiculousness of her situation. Deep down, she harbors a painful desire for him to realize she is not the one he seeks, yet she suppresses this truth, hiding her face behind the fan. Her internal conflict is interrupted by the arrival of Lord Lawless, who approaches with a charming smile. He greets her, complimenting her beauty by claiming it rivals the moon itself, and expresses his joy at seeing her. He presents a small, elegant box, apologizing for the sudden nature of the gift, and asks if she would accept it. Lisette looks into the box to find a masquerade mask, intricately patterned to match the design of Lord Lawless's own attire. She hesitates, questioning if it is truly acceptable for her to receive something so fine, but Lawless reassures her, instructing her to turn around so he may help her put it on. Lawless steps behind her, his hands raising to the back of her head to secure the mask. As he works the ribbons, his fingers graze against the sensitive nape of her neck, sending a sharp jolt of nervous energy through her. Lisette stands rigid, terrified that he might detect the rapid, thundering pace of her heart. He finishes the adjustment and steps back, while she breathlessly thanks him. Lawless admires how well the mask suits her and playfully suggests they should attend another masquerade ball together in the future. He teases that he would love to give her as many masks as she desires, causing Lisette to laugh softly and demur, stating she could not possibly wear that many. As they prepare to depart, Lisette suddenly remembers the undelivered message from her father and begins to speak. Before she can finish, a man rushing from the opposite direction collides heavily with them. Lawless reacts instantly, steadying Lisette and asking if she is hurt, while the stranger apologizes profusely for his haste. The stranger looks up, and a spark of recognition flashes across his face as he identifies Lawless as Duke Vissant. Lawless, in turn, recognizes the man as the Count but maintains a polite distance, stating he would love to talk but has pressing business. The Count, realizing the bad timing, quickly excuses himself and retreats through the manor's entrance. Lawless whispers that the encounter couldn't be helped, while Lisette stares in shock, realizing the man was indeed her father. Settled inside the carriage, the atmosphere is thick with the tension of the near-miss. Lawless breaks the silence, admitting he was truly surprised to bump into Lord Datar and noting the unfortunate timing of the encounter. Lisette hides her face completely behind her fan, sweating anxiously. Lawless, misinterpreting her silence, rationalizes the event, suggesting that even just greeting the Count should be considered a good thing. He speculates that to the Count, it likely appeared as though Lawless was simply returning home. Lisette internally breathes a sigh of relief, realizing that her failure to deliver her father's message earlier had inadvertently saved her cover. She reflects on the convenience of Count Datar appearing at that exact moment, even if it was a coincidence. Lawless notices her continued withdrawal and leans in, concern etching his features as he asks if she is feeling unwell. Lisette quickly denies it, asserting she is fine, but internally she feels the crushing weight of her deception, comparing herself to a con artist for letting Lawless believe she is Lisette Datar. Lawless comments on her fan, chuckling that she seems to be using it to hide even while wearing a mask. He admits that while he understands it might be a habit, he wishes he could see her lips. As the carriage rolls to a stop outside the venue, he remarks that they have arrived and decides to save the pleasure of seeing her face for the ball itself. Stepping out of the carriage, Lisette thanks him, but Lawless directs her attention to his outstretched hand. He playfully chides her for offering the wrong hand before taking her fingers in his own. Instead of a standard kiss of greeting, he presses his mouth to the back of her hand, biting down with an intensity that is deeper and more possessive than usual. Lisette flinches slightly, a small sound escaping her lips at the sensation. Lawless looks up at her, his gaze piercing through his mask, and whispers a wish to see her real face before the mark he just left on her skin disappears. They ascend the stairs toward the castle, the massive structure glowing in the night. As they enter the ballroom, the crowd reacts with audible murmurs and whispers. Guests point and gossip, noticing the matching masks and the unidentified lady standing beside the famous Lord Lawless. Speculation runs wild that the Duke of Vissant has finally found a partner, with some observers calling it a favorable wind. Lawless remains unfazed by the attention, turning to Lisette and formally asking her to dance. Lisette feels a pang of unworthiness, believing that a man like him is too good for a liar like her, but she accepts his invitation. On the dance floor, they move together in rhythm. Lisette acknowledges to herself that despite her guilt, her heart desperately wants this moment. Lawless speaks softly, confessing that while he previously found the culture of using fans to hide one's face embarrassing, he now enjoys the glimpse of her lips. He suggests that gradually revealing more of herself to him might not be such a bad thing. The intimacy of the moment escalates as Lawless leans in closer, his face hovering just inches from hers. Lisette stares at him, thinking that if he kissed her right then, it would be perfect. However, panic abruptly seizes her, and she pulls away, stammering an apology and claiming she needs something to drink. Lisette flees to a quiet balcony, leaning against the stone railing to catch her breath. She touches her chest, noting how tense her throat had become, and realizes she genuinely needed the drink to calm her nerves. Her face burns with a mix of relief and lingering desire as she admits to herself that she truly thought he was going to kiss her. Her moment of solitude is shattered by a voice from the shadows, wishing her a good evening and calling her a thief. Lisette spins around to see another woman emerging into the light. The stranger wears a mask and dress identical to Lisette's, mirroring her appearance perfectly. Lisette stares in shock, noting that the woman shares her exact height and silver hair. The stranger confirms the rumors of an impostor are true and introduces herself with a cold, mocking smile as the real Lisette Datar. She instructs the protagonist to remember her face from now on, signaling the end of the deception. The opulent ballroom, previously a haven of polite whispers and clinking glasses, erupts into a theater of accusation as a noblewoman confronts a masked figure regarding the identity of Lisette Datar. The accuser, standing firm with the confidence of someone armed with knowledge, loudly proclaims her awareness of the Count's daughter whom past suitors had originally sought to marry. She points a damning finger at the masked woman, charging her with the deceit of Lord Lawless. The air grows heavy with the weight of the allegation, the accuser asserting that her information comes from numerous allies who support her cause. She recounts the history of a specific mansion, a residence she claims was a favorite of hers, and accuses the masked woman of attempting to seize not only that property but her brother as well. The memory of being forced to leave that cherished home fuels her visible resentment, a bitterness she directs squarely at the woman before her. The interrogation intensifies as the accuser questions the masked woman's memory of the mansion itself. She lashes out with unchecked hostility, branding the masked woman and her mother as nothing more than thieves. Asserting her own legitimacy, she claims she was invited to the mansion and questions if the accused truly has no recollection of it. A flashback manifests in the accuser's words, painting a picture of childhood where Lord Lawless, hailing from the ducal house, used to visit the estate. She invokes these memories as a weapon, describing how she used to play with him frequently in that place which now stands as a sanctuary of her past. The masked woman, visibly shaken by the onslaught, stammers in confusion, questioning the reality of the accusations hurled against her. She attempts to defend the acquisition of the mansion, stating they received it through proper procedures. However, the accuser counters with her father's testimony that the mansion was inherited from another noble family, deducing that it must have been the Datar family. The connection solidifies in her mind as she reasons that it makes sense for her father and Count Datar to have been acquaintances. Despite the property dispute, her primary focus snaps back to her sibling. She vows fiercely that she will not give up her brother, Lawless. She condemns the masked woman as the one who stole the property, her voice rising above the murmurs of the surrounding crowd who gasp at the unfolding dispute. Guests exchange confused glances, wondering what is transpiring in the middle of the celebration. Dismissing the material wealth with a wave of arrogance, the accuser declares she will let the masked woman keep the mansion, claiming she does not care for the building itself. Her priority remains singular and personal. She demands the return of her brother, labeling the masked woman a thief once more amidst the scandalized whispers of the onlookers. To ensure no one else falls victim to what she perceives as a charade, she commands the masked woman to reveal her face. She demands the exposure of the visage that pretended to be her and deceived her brother. Cornered, the masked woman attempts to clarify her position, stating she never told Lord Lawless that she wasn't Lisette. She pleads ignorance regarding the mansion's history but concedes a crucial truth. She did, in fact, deceive him. This admission hangs in the air, a fragile confession that does nothing to quell the accuser's rage. Suddenly, the accuser lunges forward, her hand grasping the mask concealing the other woman's face. The masked woman cries out in shock, asking what she thinks she is doing. The accuser proclaims this violation a punishment. With a sharp motion, the mask is ripped away, and the accuser gasps as the face beneath is revealed to the gathered crowd and, most importantly, to Lord Lawless. The sound of the mask tearing away echoes like a whip crack. The protagonist stands exposed, her face bared to the judgment of the room. She utters Lord Lawless's name, her voice trembling with the anticipation of rejection. To the shock of the onlookers, Lawless does not recoil. Instead, he moves to protect her, creating a barrier between her and the crowd. He whispers to her, questioning why she is protecting him, but ultimately assures her that the ordeal is over. The unmasked woman looks up at him, her eyes wide with disbelief as he stands resolute by her side. The accuser, now revealed to be the one claiming the identity of the real Lisette, stares in bewilderment. She calls out to her brother, unable to comprehend why he acts as a shield for the impostor. She rationalizes that perhaps he hasn't truly seen the woman's face yet, hoping that visual confirmation will break the spell. However, Lawless remains unmoved. The real Lisette's frustration boils over. She screams that the woman stole him from her and asserts her identity as the true Lisette. She desperately tries to convince her brother of her identity. The crowd reacts with disdain, calling the scene disgraceful as she reveals her own face in a fit of passion. The real Lisette implores Lawless to stop holding such a woman in his arms, her jealousy palpable. Lawless snaps back, denying her assertions with a sharp click of his tongue. The accuser persists, labeling the protagonist a thieving cat who impersonated her and deceived countless suitors. She challenges Lawless, asking if he plans to make excuses for the woman now. Lawless confronts the accusation directly, demanding to know what exactly she claims isn't true. Lawless begins to unravel the complex web of misunderstandings that led to this moment. He explains that the people she speaks of mistakenly believed the protagonist was Lady Lisette and proposed to her on their own accord. He clarifies that when the protagonist attempted to point out that they had the wrong person, the suitors would fly into a rage. He urges the accuser to look for herself, pointing out the absurdity of the situation. He reveals that the protagonist even went so far as to show her face once to convince the misguided suitors, an act that almost always resulted in broken engagements. The accuser seizes on this, arguing that the protagonist was indeed pretending to be her and deceiving people. She accuses the protagonist of fooling Lawless as well, despite being a fake. The protagonist, head bowed, admits to the deception regarding Lawless. She offers a sincere apology for keeping it a secret. She confesses that it is true she maintained the ruse with Lord Lawless. The accuser, vindicated by the admission, chastises her for toying with her brother's feelings and shamelessly appearing at the masquerade ball. She brands the protagonist a con artist and a thief, demanding to know why she still lingers in Lawless's arms. Relentless, the accuser commands the protagonist to reveal the truth fully. She insists that the protagonist simply needs to tell the truth and decline Lawless right there and then. The protagonist falters, unsure of the meaning behind these demands. Lawless intervenes to clarify the history further. He explains that not just one, but several men who were originally supposed to propose to his sister mistook the protagonist for her and proposed to the wrong woman instead. He recounts how the suitors, upon realizing they had accidentally proposed to the wrong count's daughter instead of Lady Lisette, were shocked. The narrative shifts to the aftermath of these mistaken proposals. Lawless reveals that the name and appearance behind the fan were very similar, contributing to the errors. He describes it as an embarrassing story, noting that the men later came to him to propose properly after realizing their blunder. However, rather than correcting the mistake publicly and saving the protagonist's reputation, everyone was generous enough to simply laugh it off. The social pressure meant that no one could tell the protagonist the truth directly to her face. The accuser deduces that the protagonist must have known the truth despite this. Lawless acknowledges that while it was a mistake, it reveals that there are indeed confusing people in the world. He adds that some claimed they told her the truth for her own good. The protagonist, absorbing this revelation, finds the story unbelievably cruel. The accuser justifies her own actions, stating she couldn't sit still and do nothing when she heard rumors that even her brother Lawless was proposing to such a woman. She felt compelled to hurry and reveal the truth to prevent the union. The protagonist hears a cold voice in her mind, one that feels as though it is pushing her away. She internalizes the rejection, feeling that the truth is naturally cold. Reflecting on her journey, the protagonist realizes she had finally made it this far, only to be confronted with her own perceived inadequacy. She recalls Lawless's promise to see her again soon. She understands now that even the burning jealousy she witnessed was directed at the real Lisette, not her. A melancholic request echoes in her memory, asking for time until the rain stops. Crushed by the weight of the revelation, she concludes that she deserves to be scorned. She believes all the sweet words spoken before were never truly for her, defining herself as a fraud and a liar. With a heavy heart, she turns to Lord Lawless, apologizing truly as she begins to slide away from him, accepting her fate as the imposter who must leave the stage. Lord Lawless stands amidst the murmuring crowd, his expression solemn as he addresses the masked woman before him, clarifying that his previous mention of a terrible story was never intended to cast aspersions upon her character. He sighs with genuine regret, offering an apology for the misunderstanding that hangs heavy in the air. The surrounding guests whisper among themselves as Lawless elucidates his true meaning. His disdain is reserved solely for the men who claimed they made a mistake in their proposals, asserting that they owe her a sincere apology. He declares with absolute conviction that mistaking the identity of the woman one desires to marry is an inexcusable offense, his voice cutting through the gossip to shield the woman standing before him. The tension in the ballroom escalates as a blonde woman, flustered and anxious, rushes toward them, insisting that Lawless is being deceived by a woman pretending to be her. Lawless looks at the interloper with genuine confusion, unable to comprehend her logic, and questions why the woman he proposed to would need to impersonate anyone else. He dismisses the notion that he proposed to the wrong person with a heavy sigh, rejecting the narrative the crowd attempts to spin. Turning a cold, piercing gaze upon the interrupting woman, he delivers a devastating rejection, stating flatly that he does not know her at all. The blonde woman recoils in shock, her hands trembling as Lawless affirms that the one he proposed to was explicitly the other count's daughter, not her. He asserts there is no possibility of error in his choice. The rival, stunned, asks if he proposed knowing the woman was Lisette Vander, to which Lawless confirms without hesitation that the woman beside him is undoubtedly Miss Lisette Vander. The rival stammers, unable to process that he never believed he was proposing to the wrong person in the first place. Amidst this confrontation, the masked Lisette finds her thoughts drifting back to a memory of Lawless in the rain, where he had asked for her time until the storm passed, promising to see her again soon. She realizes with a jolt that his intense gaze and heartfelt words from that day were always directed solely at her. However, doubt lingers in her mind as she recalls a marriage proposal letter and a childhood promise from a brother Lawless, who vowed to make her his bride. The rival interrupts the internal reverie, shouting her name, Lisette de Tar, and claiming that Lawless used to call her by the nickname Lisa. She insists that he simply couldn't remember because she never formally introduced herself by that moniker. The crowd murmurs in confusion as the rival presses her advantage, claiming the proposal letter addressed her as, "My cute Lisette de Tar," and asking if he remembers helping her create that nickname. Lawless snaps, his patience exhausted, and he grabs the rival's arm to silence her, declaring he has never heard of such a ridiculous nickname nor written the letter she describes. The rival, desperate to prove their connection, cites a childhood memory where a boy named Lawless vowed to become a duke and possessed a distinctive birthmark on the back of his right hand. With calm precision, Lawless dismantles her delusion. He explains that as a second son, the path to becoming a marquis does not align with her story, and he raises his right hand to reveal smooth, unmarked skin, devoid of any birthmark. He deduces the truth: she has mistaken him for Lawless Badham, a man from the Marquis Badham household who actually bears that name and the birthmark she remembers. He concludes that her entire premise relies on the words of a child she met long ago, a completely different person. The masked Lisette sways, overcome by the revelation, as Lawless formally introduces himself as Lawless Visant. The rival, cornered and desperate, shifts her attack to Lisette's family, accusing Lisette's father of stealing land and peasants from her own father, claiming the Vander estate is built on theft. She demands to know if Lawless is truly content proposing to the daughter of a thief. Lawless remains unfazed, confirming he is well aware of Count Vander's history. He corrects the rival's distorted version of events, explaining that Count Vander did not steal land but rather manage territories that were legitimately granted to him by His Majesty the King after the previous owners failed to manage them. He asserts that the Vander estate was acquired through proper, legal procedures. He further reveals that he investigated the matter personally, suggesting that the rival's father merely lied to save face in front of his daughter. The rival trembles, clinging to her father's lie that they were robbed by Madel, but Lawless condemns the true sin, sullying the honor of Count Vander and his daughter based on falsehoods. Lawless raises 2 fingers, and then a third, methodically listing the rival's offenses against Lisette. He condemns her for unilaterally deciding Lisette was a liar and a thief's daughter without discussion, an act he defines as a grave insult. He continues his indictment, stating that forcibly removing a woman's mask in public is a transgression that must never happen. Finally, he declares that deliberately touching and approaching him while knowing she is not the intended fiancée is absolutely forbidden. His eyes burn with intensity as he vows never to forgive her for the disgrace she has brought upon Lady Lisette. The rival cowers, tears forming as she stammers an apology, claiming ignorance of the hurt she caused. Just as the confrontation reaches its peak, the heavy doors swing open, and a booming voice interrupts the scene, frantically shouting for Lisette de Tar, and asking if the ball has already ended, signaling the arrival of yet another chaotic element. The ballroom's murmurs erupt into chaos as a frantic voice shatters the tension, bellowing the name, Lisette de Tar, across the crowded hall. The blonde woman, previously locked in a confrontation with Lord Lawless Visant, turns her head in confusion, her eyes widening as a man bursts through the gathered guests. He is a stark contrast to the composed nobility surrounding him, disheveled, breathless, yet beaming with an oblivious, bright energy as he spots his target. He rushes forward, his shoes tapping sharply against the polished floor, and declares with triumphant relief that he has finally found her. The newcomer points a thumb at his own chest, introducing himself with a grin as Lawless Badham. The blonde woman recoils, her mind struggling to process the figure before her, demanding to know who he is even as her gaze locks onto the back of his right hand. There, unmistakable and damning, sits the birthmark she had used as proof of her childhood romance only moments prior. She stammers, the realization dawning on her that this man, not the Duke's son standing coldly beside her, is the Lawless she made a promise to marry when they were children. Oblivious to the woman's internal collapse, the real Lawless Badham notices the imposing figure of the protagonist. He immediately straightens his posture, recognizing the Duke of Visant, and offers a respectful, if somewhat awkward, greeting, honoring the hierarchy of nobility. The protagonist, Lord Lawless Visant, observes this interaction with a stoic, almost bored expression, simply acknowledging the newcomer's presence while the blonde woman trembles, her reality fracturing. The crowd whispers intensify, guests exchanging bewildered glances as they try to decipher the commotion. The blonde woman, now identified as the intended fiancée of Lawless Badham, stands frozen. Visant, seizing the moment to finalize the humiliation, steps closer to his true betrothed, the masked Lizette Vander. He addresses the newcomer, noting that this man is the fourth former fiancé, who caused an uproar after being rejected, a man who had also mistaken the identity of his partner. Visant points out the irony. This man, Lawless Badham, is a second son of a noble family, fitting the description the blonde woman had clung to, yet she had failed to recognize him until he announced himself. Lawless Badham, scratching his head sheepishly, insists he could never mistake the woman he intends to marry, declaring he would never forget his Lizette de Tar. The distinction hangs in the air. The rival is Lizette de Tar. The protagonist's fiancée is Lizette Vander. Visant pulls his masked partner closer, his hand protective on her waist, and confirms to the room that the woman in his arms is Lady Lizette Vander, his fiancée. The rival, Lizette de Tar, collapses to her knees, the weight of her public error crushing her. She stammers, trying to salvage a shred of dignity by asking Visant if he is at least an acquaintance of Badham, hoping for some connection to validate her delusion. Visant cuts her off with a sharp, dismissive glare, stating unequivocally that her claims are a lie. He asserts he does not know her, nor does he know any Lizette de Tar, dismantling her fantasy completely. Tears stream down her face as she sobs, the humiliation absolute. However, the masked Lizette Vander intervenes. She addresses the crowd with a grace that silences the whispers, offering a sincere apology for the disturbance and categorizing the entire event as a mere misunderstanding to spare the rival further destruction. She encourages the guests to return to their conversations and enjoy the ball, effectively commanding the room and ending the spectacle. The guests, sensing the dismissal, begin to disperse, remarking on the strange entertainment they just witnessed. Visant watches his fiancée with a softened gaze, impressed by her mercy. He invites her away from the suffocating crowd, leading her toward the tranquility of the balcony. Under the pale glow of the moon, Lizette leans against the stone railing. She explains her actions, admitting that she handled the situation delicately because she didn't want to hurt the rival's pride, drawing a parallel to how she handled the rejection of Lawless Badham in the past to avoid anger. Visant listens, acknowledging her wisdom but admitting his own lingering anger. He confesses a desire to punish the men who hurt her, feeling the weight of her past rejections as a present issue. Lizette turns to him, her expression unseen behind the mask but her voice tender. She assures him that those painful memories no longer hurt her, because every trial she endured led her to this moment with him. Visant touches his chin, contemplating the past. He reveals a truth that bridges their histories. They did meet when they were children, back when she was 5 years old. He explains that the mansion she lives in now, the Vander estate, used to belong to the de Tar family, the rival's family. This revelation clarifies the connection. He had visited that mansion and met her there. He recalls reading books with her, a memory she had forgotten. He smiles, recounting how she never told him her real name back then. Because of this, he had used the nickname Lisa, a name the rival had tried to claim, but which Visant had actually bestowed upon the young Lizette Vander. He chuckles, remembering how she had imperiously demanded he call her only you, mimicking a princess from the stories they read. He asks if she wants him to call her you again, teasing her gently. Lizette flushes, overwhelmed by the realization that his proposal was never a result of a misunderstanding or a case of mistaken identity. She realizes that every word of affection he spoke was truly meant for her alone. Visant gazes at her with intense devotion. He tells her that until she believes him, until she feels safe enough to remove her mask and show him her face, he will wait. He confesses that even when she looks away, his feelings only grow stronger. Moved by his unwavering patience, Lizette makes her decision. She calls his name, demanding his attention. As he turns to face her, she reaches up and unties the ribbon holding her mask in place. The mask falls away, revealing her face to him for the first time since their reunion. Visant's eyes widen, his breath hitching in his throat. He admits he is so surprised he cannot speak, captivated by her beauty even though he had fallen for her while she was hidden. He reaches out, his hand cupping her cheek, and confesses that his heart feels like it is going to burst. Lisette, shy but bold, asks for permission to remove his mask as well. Vincent leans in, closing the distance between them, and whispers for his princess to go ahead. The scene shifts as they prepare to leave. Vincent, overwhelmed by a possessive adoration, abruptly sweeps Lisette off her feet into a princess carry. She squeaks in surprise, but he holds her firm. He declares that the face reveal is over for the public. He refuses to let anyone else see her beautiful face right now. With a decisive stride, he carries her toward the garden exit, stealing her away from the world to keep her beauty solely for himself. Duke Vincent, also known as Toya Lawless, stands resolutely before the towering iron gates of a grand estate, confirming to the woman beside him that the mansion originally belonged to the Datar family. He asserts that he verified this information with his father and secured the government's backing to proceed with his acquisition. As the narrative lens shifts to the past, the mansion appears in its prime, a bustle of activity where the Datar family hosted evening parties almost daily, inviting numerous nobles to fill the halls. While the adults engaged in these frequent social gatherings, they allowed their children to play together during the daylight hours. Toya observes that these gatherings were not merely social but strategic, likely orchestrated to foster political marriages among the youth. The scene darkens as the political reality of their world comes to the forefront. Toya explains that the country enacted strict laws under the pretense that children must not be used as pawns in power struggles between families. Lisette, listening intently, realizes the implication that their childhood interactions were technically forbidden. Toya confirms her suspicion, noting that even debut balls and fan culture are under scrutiny, with the government considering abolishing them entirely if complaints rise. This strict control stems from a deliberate intention to avoid the formation of strong bonds between noble families. A visual map of the kingdom illustrates the precarious balance, as Toya notes that if the nobility gains too much power, the royal family cannot simply sit by and watch. Toya continues his analysis of the political landscape, gesturing to emphasize that while the country provides the stage for social interaction, it does not do so willingly. The nobility, however, attempts to circumvent these restrictions by taking advantage of old, conservative methods. They seek alliances with prestigious families to gain power, despite the betrothal system being outlawed. Toya critiques this hypocrisy, noting that the nobles claim these maneuvers are for the children's sake and label it tradition. He argues that forcing children to hide their faces and suppress romantic feelings only conditions them to follow their parents' will, leaving the children to be tossed around by the whims of their elders. He condemns the nobles' desire for power, which lies hidden beneath the veneer of tradition, clashing with the government's agenda to prevent the nobility from gaining influence. Reflecting on the Datar family's specific downfall, Toya notes that they fell into significant debt. This financial ruin resulted from the excessive cost of hosting tea and evening parties almost daily, coupled with the expense of Lisette's extravagant dresses. He surmises that she was likely showered with gifts by men who had heard rumors of her beauty, even though such gifts are technically forbidden. Toya admits that back in those days of limited communication, the Datar family's approach was a noble strategy, though he predicts such methods will eventually die out. The conversation shifts to a more personal confession as Toya reveals the truth behind a recent encounter. He admits that he intentionally bumped into Lisette in front of the mansion. He explains that he had visited the territory owned by the Count Datar family by royal order to inspect it, accompanied by the Count himself. A flashback depicts this encounter. Toya, dressed in his uniform and looking distressed, bumped into Lisette. Despite his apology and visible haste, Lisette, recognizing him as Duke Vincent, immediately asked if he was hurt. Toya recalls the difficulty of that moment, as he had just pointed out various issues during the inspection and reported to His Majesty the King that the management situation was dire. He had suggested that it would be ideal for the family to let go of the deficit-ridden lands and rebuild, yet Lisette still treated him with kindness. Returning to the present within the carriage, Lisette absorbs this information, realizing that Lord Lawless truly knows everything about her situation. Toya gazes at her affectionately, confessing that he always felt the need to build up his knowledge as a duke, but his primary motivation was to answer her curious questions at any time. He declares with conviction that she is the one who shaped who he is today. While others mocked his intense desire for knowledge as foolish curiosity, Lisette gently accepted it. She urges him to continue his story, finding it educational, though he humbly denies her praise. Toya reminisces about the time when the Datar family was gaining influence and wealth. His father, a duke, often visited their estate under the pretense of checking up on them, as he was on friendly terms with Lord Vander. It was during these visits that Toya met Lisette. He recalls the gifts she gave him, such as handmade pressed flowers and beautiful glass beads. With a chuckle, he reminds her of a more physical memory. She bit him. Lisette is shocked by this revelation, but Toya describes it fondly as a cute little bite mark. Flashbacks to their childhood illustrate Lisette's possessiveness. Whenever young Toya tried to speak with another young lady, Lisette would come running, declaring that she didn't want him getting along with any other girl. In the flashback, a young Lisette bites his finger, and when her uncle questions the act, she explains she wanted to leave a bite mark to prove he was hers. Back in the present carriage, Lisette apologizes, realizing that must have hurt, but Toya dismisses the pain. As the carriage arrives at their destination, Toya refuses to let the moment pass. He touches his hand, recalling that he wants someone to bring disinfectant, but insists he was really happy about the bite. He clarifies his intent. He wants to replace that temporary bite mark with a ring, symbolizing a permanent bond. He thought his actions would get the message across, wanting to ensure he belonged to her not just with a mark that would disappear, but forever. Lisette hesitates to exit the carriage, overwhelmed by happiness but feeling a lingering uncertainty. Toya reveals that he has already been privately making arrangements about the ceremony with her father. Lisette is shocked to learn the ceremony is already being discussed. Toya presses on, stating he will come again tomorrow to talk about the engagement and wedding ceremonies, as he does not want to be apart from her for even a moment. Lisette realizes that her father has been meticulously preparing for this ever since the incident at the masquerade ball, allowing the ceremony to happen at any time. Before they part, Toya commands Lisette to come to him. He lifts her easily, assuring her she isn't heavy. Ignoring the social rule that a kiss before the engagement ceremony is forbidden, he declares he could never follow such a rule and kisses her deeply. He whispers her name, Toya, and tells her she is beautiful. The narrative jumps to the wedding preparations. Lisette stands in a stunning gown, noting that today's dress does not look uncomfortable at all. Her attendant recalls how worried Lisette was about her previous dress looking strange, highlighting the difference in her reaction now. The engagement ceremony and wedding are held on consecutive days because her father, unable to wait any longer, pushed for it, and Lord Lawless went along with the haste. Though the Datar family is described as a flickering candle about to go out, they still hold their noble rank. Toya notes that the suitors who used to pester Lisette and then rejected her after the masquerade, claiming she was too good for them, flipped their attitudes once she was with the Duke. However, Toya, the only one who refused to give up, now rejects them all. The final scene settles in the bedroom on their wedding night. Toya, having changed his nickname for her to Lisa, prepares to turn off the lantern. He wishes her a good night, but notices she is trembling. Lisette, feeling the overwhelming weight of Lord Lawless's love every day, steels herself. She decides that tonight, she must say what is on her mind, leading to a tense, intimate conclusion as she hesitates to let the night end. Lisette sits on the edge of the bed, her cheeks flushed with anticipation as she tentatively broaches the subject hanging heavily in the air, asking if they are not going to proceed with the evening's expected activities. Lawless, caught off guard by her directness, stammers in response, his composure cracking as he questions if she truly just asked him to come back to bed. The atmosphere shifts to an awkward negotiation of intimacy, with Lisette clarifying that she understands the implications of their union extend beyond merely spending time together and specifically involve the bed. She presses him, noting that despite their marriage, they have yet to consummate their union with the first night. Lawless, attempting to feign ignorance or perhaps innocence, listens as Lisette explains that she knows the first night is when a married couple sleeps together for the first time. She asserts her maturity, declaring that she is already an adult and, more importantly, his wife, revealing that she had studied the matter thoroughly in preparation. Lawless hurriedly agrees, admitting his surprise that she possesses such knowledge, trying to regain his footing in the conversation. In the silence that follows, Lisette's internal monologue reveals her deepening insecurity. She worries that the lack of intimacy over the past 3 days stems from a lack of attractiveness on her part. She chastises herself for forcing Lawless into an uncomfortable position, interpreting his hesitation as a sign that he is forcing himself to be with her. Her anxiety mounts as she recalls that 3 days have already passed since the wedding without any physical advancement. Suddenly, Lawless drops to his knees beside the bed, bowing his head in a dramatic apology. He concocts a desperate excuse, claiming to have developed a chronic illness to explain his avoidance, an admission that leaves Lisette bewildered. Lawless lifts his head to explain the root of his paralysis. He still views a part of her as the innocent Lisa from their shared past. He reminisces about the adorable, crybaby child who used to bite things and possessed an overly curious nature, a pure and romantic image that he struggles to reconcile with the woman before him. Lawless confesses the darkness of his own desires, admitting that he fears giving in to his urges would taint her purity or perhaps even break her. He fears that if he unleashes his desire, she might end up hating him. He begs her to look at him, his usual bold demeanor replaced by a panicked vulnerability as he apologizes for his frantic state. Lisette, however, reaches out to cup his face, her expression gentle and reassuring. She declares that she will not be hurt nor broken by him, and she promises that she could never hate him. Asserting her identity, she corrects him, stating she is not the child, Lisa, but the adult, Lisette, fully 18 years old. With a soft smile, she invites him to do as he wishes. Lisette playfully warns him that if he starts crying and begging, she might not have the confidence to stop herself, suggesting a shift in power dynamics where she is ready to embrace him fully. She brushes off his concerns, claiming she hasn't cried in years and doesn't mind his intensity. Lawless watches her, stunned, as she continues to dismantle his hesitation. Lisette reveals the depth of her own anticipation, confessing that she is not the same child he remembers and that she has waited for him every night without wearing underwear, hoping he would come to her. She apologizes for being an indecent wife, her vulnerability laid bare. Overwhelmed, Lawless pulls her into an embrace, declaring her the best wife. They share a kiss on the lips, their first since the wedding, and the intimacy deepens as Lisette notes internally that this is the longest kiss they have shared yet. As the passion escalates, Lisette implores him not to stop. However, Lawless pulls back slightly, noticing tears welling in her eyes. He acknowledges that he made her cry after all, but rather than stopping, he observes her with tender concern. He admits that while he doesn't want to make her weep, seeing her tear mole wet with tears triggers memories of the past. Lawless wipes a tear from her cheek, telling her not to cry, which triggers a flashback for Lisette. She recalls a moment from their childhood where Lawless comforted her over a lost picture book, offering to look for it together. The memory of him acting as a protective figure overlaps with the present, and she realizes he is doing the exact same thing now. Caught in the nostalgic blur of the moment and the intimacy of the present, Lisette instinctively calls him brother, noting how natural it feels to say it out loud. She asks if it is bad to use the old nickname older brother, unaware of the effect it has on him. Lawless covers his face with his hand, visibly struggling, and admits that it feels like he is doing something wrong. He confesses that the taboo nature of the nickname feels too good, which makes it very bad for his self-control. Lisette, confused by his reaction, tilts her head and repeats the title brother, causing Lawless to shudder. The nickname snaps his restraint. He declares that he will now give her plenty of lessons in bad things, asserting that he won't let her escape anymore. The scene fades as they succumb to the night. The following morning, sunlight streams into the room where Lisette lies in bed, unable to move. Lawless hovers over her, apologizing profusely for going a bit too far. Lisette asks him to take it easier in the future, to which a dejected Lawless agrees. However, she softly adds that, sometimes, it might be okay, causing Lawless to perk up instantly. He dotes on her, asking what she wants for breakfast and telling her she can do whatever she wants with him. Lisette giggles, noting he is getting carried away. As he looks at her with adoration, Lisette wonders internally if she is too weak to him or if she is spoiling him too much. Later, Lawless presents Lisette with a massive stack of envelopes. Lisette is shocked by the volume, and Lawless explains that these are all the letters he wrote to her while he was away on his expedition. Lisette stares at the mountain of paper, realizing the immense amount of time it must have taken to write them all. Lawless admits that he wrote them with the assumption that they would never reach her, as he believed he was proposing to Lisette Vander, and convinced himself she wouldn't be at home. He acknowledges that writing so many letters is a breach of etiquette and a burden to the recipient, apologizing for his desperation. He explains that he didn't even realize he had written so much and that they required a separate bird mail service to be delivered. Lawless covers his face in embarrassment, confessing that despite the awkwardness, he couldn't help wanting to make Lisette his wife. Lisette smiles warmly, telling him that she likes this side of him. She thanks him for sending her so many of his feelings. She appreciates how his usually perfect demeanor shows a little clumsiness in front of her. However, she takes his hand and gently bites his finger, issuing a possessive command. She tells him he must not show that side of himself to anyone else because he is her husband and hers alone. Smiling radiantly, she calls him, "my dear older brother," once more, sealing their agreement as a promise. A fragmentation of memory pierces the present, revealing a devastating scene of rejection where a man stands firm in his refusal. He declares with absolute certainty that the woman before him is not the one he seeks, identifying his fiancée as Lady Lisette Vander rather than the woman standing there. The woman, whose internal thoughts reveal a deep betrayal, realizes that the big brother figure she had always loved has transformed into a stranger. The man identifies her coldly as Lisette de Tar, an 18-year-old, and vows never to forgive her for the hostility she allegedly displayed toward Lady Lisette in public. He cruelly clarifies that his proposal was intended solely for the other count's daughter, shattering the romantic illusions held by Lisette de Tar. The scene shifts to the aftermath of this humiliation, where Lisette grapples with the sheer indignity of the situation. She laments the embarrassment, her mind racing with the knowledge that she possesses countless suitors, a testament to her widespread popularity. Yet, the sting of being named Lisette de Tar in such a context burns, and she vehemently rejects the reality unfolding before her. Fighting back tears, she steels herself against the urge to cry, denying the truth of the rejection while the murmurs of the crowd begin to rise around her. She perceives the judgment in their eyes but internally declares that their stares hold no meaning for her, refusing to let them make a mockery of her existence. In a grand ballroom, the narrative moves to a balcony where a group of masked figures converse. One man, Prince Edion, announces his intention to step out for a moment, dismissing the concerns of a woman next to him who asks if something is wrong. His companion chuckles, noting the presence of incredible ladies at the venue. Below them, chaos erupts as a man in a cravat desperately calls out for Lisette de Tar, imploring her to wait. Lisette flees through the corridors, her movements hurried and desperate as the sound of her footsteps echoes. She vehemently denies the accusations being hurled at her, recalling that she had already clarified to this pursuer that this was a case of mistaken identity. She insists that she verified the situation with others at the venue and that no one would possibly accept his proposal under these conditions. The pursuer, relentless, argues that she definitely introduced herself as Lisette de Tar, to which she counters that the name has already been discarded, attempting to sever ties with that identity. The confrontation escalates physically as the man grabs her arm, demanding an explanation for her rejection. He asserts his superior social standing, proclaiming that he hails from a Marquis family, a rank significantly higher than her own Count family, and dismisses the relevance of him being a second son. Lisette recoils in pain and shock, realizing the masked Prince Edion is nearby, witnessing the altercation. She lashes out at her captor, warning him that associating with him ruins her reputation and questions if he believes he can escape consequences for such violence. The masked Edion intervenes, his presence causing a distraction. Lisette seizes the opportunity to break free, threatening to scream if the Marquis's son does not release her immediately. As the grip loosens, she realizes she must escape while the chance exists, her mind focused solely on reaching the carriage before her pursuers can catch up. In the chaos, she notices Edion's mask but cannot retrieve it, mentally noting that she will bring it to the estate later. The persistent suitor continues to shout her name, bargaining that he will forgive her if she returns immediately, but she flees without looking back. 3 months pass since the incident at the ball. At the de Tar residence, a butler informs Lisette that a man has arrived, claiming to be the one who picked up a mask at the previous ball and has come to return it. Lisette observes the visitor from a distance, noting that while he resembles the masked savior, the passage of time and the mask he wore makes her uncertain of his identity. Her imagination runs wild, hypothesizing that perhaps it took him this long to gather the courage to approach her, or that he fell in love with her at first sight and is using the mask as a pretext for a proposal. Lisette contemplates the traditional, intricate process of engagement displayed on a chart in her room, which involves an official engagement, a face reveal, conversation through a fan, a letter exchange, and finally a face-to-face meeting. She acknowledges that normally, a letter of proposal would be the first step, and any suitor skipping these protocols would be turned away at the gate. However, this visitor has jumped straight to a face-to-face encounter. She admits to herself that since the ball, no suitors have visited, leaving her anxious about her prospects. Evaluating the man's appearance, she deduces he must be of considerable status, perhaps even a prince, as he surpasses all previous suitors in looks and bearing. Resigning herself to the lack of other options, she decides he should feel honored that she is even entertaining this breach of protocol and agrees to at least accept his letter. However, when she attempts to take the letter, the man, now revealed as Edion without his mask, confuses her by not handing it over. He bluntly clarifies that he did not come to propose but solely to return her mask, apologizing for the 3-month delay caused by an injury. He asks if the servants did not inform her of his purpose and warns her not to get the wrong idea. Lisette, flustered and embarrassed, snaps back that he is confusing and should have stated his non-suitor status sooner. Edion calmly retorts that he stated his intent from the very beginning and instructs her not to point her finger at him. The situation takes a shocking turn when Edion casually reveals that he is technically married. Lisette freezes, her mind unable to process the confession. Before she can react, Edion suddenly commands her to hide, shushing her as he moves with urgency. He pins her against the wall, shielding her body with his own. He criticizes her for showing her bare face around when she doesn't even have a fiancé. Edion's attention focuses on a carriage passing outside, identifying the crest as belonging to a troublesome ducal house, known for being the source of many rumors. Lisette, flushed and overwhelmed by the physical closeness, protests that not even her previous suitors were allowed such intimacy. She begs him to let go, but Edion ignores her pleas, observing that the carriage is deliberately slowing down outside her estate. Edion questions why the Duke's carriage is in this remote location and decides to enter the mansion to return the mask properly and avoid detection. He opens the door and pulls her inside, leaving Lisette bewildered as to why a man who is not a suitor would go to such lengths. Once inside, she thanks him for his help but immediately reprimands him for barging in, pointing out the contradiction in his actions. Edion remains unbothered, stating he doesn't care what people say, but warns her that a duke's carriage draws attention and she would become the subject of gossip if seen. He remarks on her guts, which Lisette finds rude. She attempts to dismiss him, demanding the mask so he can leave, but notices the anxious gazes of her servants nearby. Realizing the optics of the situation, she quickly pivots and invites him to stay for tea, using it as a cover to wait until the carriage departs. She adds a caveat that she prefers he leaves quickly since he is not a suitor. Edion agrees to the tea and the plan to leave once the carriage is gone, acknowledging that spreading troublesome rumors would hurt the Datar family reputation. Lisette impatiently affirms the plan, eager for his departure. Finally, as the tension settles into a temporary truce, the man introduces himself simply as Edion. Lisette, internally questioning how events spiraled to this point, formally responds, introducing herself as Lady Lisette Datar, marking the official, albeit chaotic, beginning of their acquaintance. The threshold of a grand estate, where a dark-haired man in formal vestments steps through the open double doors. A blonde woman, Lisette, stands ready to receive him, gesturing towards the parlor furniture and inviting him to take a seat wherever he prefers. However, she immediately pauses the interaction, raising a hand to request a moment of patience from her guest. The man, maintaining a stoic expression, agrees with a simple affirmation, his gaze lingering on the room. The scene shifts focus to the interaction between Lisette and her elderly butler, Benji. Lisette leans in close, her expression softening with concern as she whispers to the servant. She has noticed his physical discomfort, observing that his back is causing him pain. Benji flinches slightly, a bead of sweat running down his temple, confirming her observation. Lisette immediately takes charge, insisting that once tea service begins, he must retire to his room to rest. She asserts that she is fully capable of preparing the tea herself and admonishes him not to worry about the task. The elderly servant trembles slightly, touched by her concern but hesitant to abandon his duties. In the background, the dark-haired guest observes this exchange silently. He notes the rumor that the Datar family handles their own finances and domestic affairs appears to be founded in truth. Having dismissed the servant, Lisette takes a seat opposite her guest. The man exhales a soft breath, relaxing into the plush armchair near the window. Lisette lifts her teacup, savoring the aroma, and comments on the quality of the brew. The man follows suit, lifting his own cup with practiced elegance. He takes a sip and his eyes widen slightly, the flavor catching him off guard. He declares the tea to be genuinely delicious. Lisette smiles, pleased, and remarks that it tastes particularly good today. She playfully adds that she will inform her father that the guest is doing a good job as well, though the man simply stares back in silence. The atmosphere warms as the guest reiterates his compliment, his expression softening into a genuine smile as he admits it has been a long time since he tasted tea of such high caliber. Lisette beams, her face flushing with pride, and thanks him for the praise. Behind her, the elderly butler Benji, who had been lingering near the door, blushes with emotion at the compliment before quietly exiting the room. The guest watches the servant leave and remarks that the Datar household possesses excellent servants. Lisette agrees immediately, her demeanor serious and proud, stating that they are, after all, the servants of House Datar. The guest reaches out, placing his hand over hers in a gesture of camaraderie, agreeing with her sentiment. However, Lizette's focus snaps to the object he is holding, a mask. She recoils, realizing he misunderstood her earlier intensity, and clarifies that she was referring to the servants, not the situation he assumed. She flails slightly, demanding the return of her mask. The guest, unfazed, suggests they simply try to get along from this point forward. He then pivots the conversation, apologizing for his earlier lapse in memory regarding her name. He admits that he was fond of the mask, which is why he picked it up, offering a belated thank you for the item. The man leans back, his demeanor shifting to one of aristocratic indifference as he explains his lack of recognition. He states plainly that he holds no interest in anyone outside of the ducal families, which is why neither her name nor her face registered with him initially. He observes her reaction, noting with a hint of amusement that she is capable of making quite a sour expression. However, he deduces that since she attended the masquerade ball, she must technically be a noble. Lisette confirms this with a dry retort, admitting that she is indeed technically a noble. The guest hands the mask back to her, and she accepts it, murmuring that she was a little surprised by his admission. He presses further into the events of the ball, recalling the commotion she caused. He remarks on how she walked away proudly despite the chaos, asking if she truly didn't care about how the other guests looked at her. Lisette dismisses the concern entirely, stating that people always make a fuss on their own accord and she finds it merely annoying. Standing tall, she declares that being the center of attention is nothing new to her. Whether the gazes directed at her are born of goodwill or malice, she refuses to change who she is, and therefore she pays them no mind. The guest lets out a small, amused huff at her bravado. He then observes that for a brief moment back then, it looked as though she were crying. Lisette flusteredly denies this interpretation, shouting that she was merely surprised because the person she was searching for turned out to be someone unexpected. She attributes the confusion to Big Brother Lawless, stammering slightly in her defense. Regaining her composure, she admits that she does understand how bothersome the stares of others can be. The guest's expression darkens as he relates to her sentiment. He leans his cheek against his hand, looking out the window, and speaks of people who should focus on themselves rather than others. Despite having many acquaintances, he reveals that people constantly say unnecessary things to him. They build up expectations that he cannot possibly meet, and he confesses that there are many times he simply wishes to be left alone. Lisette listens intently, moving closer with an intense expression of solidarity, exclaiming that she totally gets it. Lisette launches into her own grievance, complaining that she cannot even remember who gave her what gifts. She mimics the voices of people asking why she won't wear the dresses they gave her, expressing her frustration that she cannot possibly respond to everything. She describes the burden of being showered with affection that comes with strings attached, where the giver expects something in return. She exclaims that people have even said such things directly to her face. The guest interrupts, asking if she perhaps made them give her the gifts, to which she vehemently denies, shouting that they sent them without asking. She clutches the mask to her chest, her expression softening. She explains that this specific mask is different from those unsolicited gifts. She wanted to escape those troublesome expectations. The guest looks at her, remarking that this side of her is unexpected. Lisette looks down at the mask lovingly, revealing that her father scraped together the money to buy it for her birthday. The guest comments on the rudeness of calling her behavior unexpected, but admits he misjudged her. He confesses that he initially thought she just wanted to be doted on. Lisette immediately corrects him, stating with a bright smile that she does love being spoiled. She claims it is only natural because she is as cute as she is. However, she draws a sharp line. She hates it when people expect something in return for their affection. The guest looks at her, stunned by her brazen confidence. He asks if she is perhaps implying that he is mistaken about her character. Lisette insists she is just being objective about herself. The guest laughs heartily, amused that she can admit she is cute without a hint of modesty. The guest leans forward, resting his chin on his hand, and looks directly at her. He agrees with her assessment, telling her plainly that she is indeed pretty cute. He notes that it is no wonder she has such confidence. Lisette freezes. Although she has been told this countless times by suitors, hearing it from him causes her heart to pound violently in her chest. She stammers a thank you, touching her chest in confusion. Trying to rationalize her reaction, Lisette argues internally that she only acts ladylike in front of suitors, and this man is not a suitor. She mentally lists the traits that make her the #1 lady you want to protect. a fluffy, gentle noble lady who stirs protective instincts. However, the guest cuts through her internal monologue, pointing out that she feels different from the rumored image of Lady Lisette. He notes her lack of modesty contradicts the gentle lady persona. Lisette snaps back, asking if he is suggesting she is kind enough to crush the dreams of her suitors immediately. He counters by asking who else could do it but her. Lisette pouts, telling him he is seriously rude with every little thing he says. The guest laughs off her comment, stating that modesty isn't always a virtue. He explains that there are people who put themselves down specifically expecting others to lift them up, a behavior he detests when the motive is transparent. Lisette agrees emphatically. Their conversation is interrupted by a knock at the door. Lisette grants permission for the person to enter. A blond man in a uniform enters, apologizing for the intrusion. He approaches the dark-haired guest and hands him a small item, explaining that it was entrusted to him by the guest's companion. The guest takes it. The uniformed man whispers a report, confirming that he made sure their carriage went unnoticed. He delivers a message stating that the Duke's carriage is gone, so the guest should return soon. The guest sighs, acknowledging the instruction. Lisette watches the exchange, asking if something happened. The guest hands a coin to the uniformed man, instructing him to give it to the servants on his behalf. He explains that he cannot deliver it himself, so the man should do it as is. The uniformed man confirms he understands. The guest turns back to the table, deciding to have just one more cup of tea before he leaves. Lisette smiles, happy to hear this. He remarks that the tea is so delicious it makes it hard to leave. He praises the tea brewed by the servants as absolutely exquisite. He then officially thanks her for the hospitality. The scene transitions to the exterior of the mansion. The dark-haired guest, now revealed to be named Zyril, walks toward a concealed carriage with his aide. The aide praises Zyril for entering the mansion without saying a word, understanding the intention to keep their presence low profile. Zyril confirms this is why he ensured the carriage was hidden from the view of the estate. The aide reminds him to act with his position in mind. As they reach the carriage, the aide asks a crucial question. Did Zyril tell the young lady of the Datar family about himself? Zyril pauses, his hand on his cravat, and replies simply that it wasn't necessary. Back inside the mansion, Lisette spots something left behind on the floor near the entrance. She picks up a handkerchief. Suddenly, she recalls the guest's parting words, "I'll come back for it another time. You go ahead and hold on to it." Lisette stands in the hallway, the realization crashing down on her. She processes the implication that he'll come back means he will visit again. She holds the handkerchief to her chest, her face flushing. She panics, crying out that she needs a new suitor to come soon or she will be in trouble. Internally, she questions why she is getting so happy about a promise from someone who isn't even a suitor. A tense atmosphere as a nobleman with dark hair, referred to as His Highness, asserts that he simply returned to fulfill a promise to retrieve a forgotten item, claiming that the initial promise shouldn't have been made if it caused such distress. The lady of the house, appearing flustered and defensive, urges him to consider his position, suggesting he could have simply purchased a replacement rather than returning personally. She questions the necessity of his arrival in a discreet carriage, noting with suspicion how he went out of his way to check the surroundings for prying eyes, which leads her to suspect ulterior motives behind his visit. He dismisses her concerns with a stoic demeanor, explaining that such secrecy is merely standard procedure when dealing with nobles who thrive on gossip, maintaining that he harbors no hidden agenda. He recalls the moments preceding his entry, where his polished shoes stepped onto the gravel outside the mansion. He had instructed his driver to wait with the carriage, anticipating a brief stop, but the situation had complicated itself. Although he had sent a letter ahead to ensure a swift retrieval, the household responded with an insistent invitation for tea, transforming what should have been a mere formality into a social obligation that required him to enter the mansion proper. Now seated within the elegant interior, he lifts a teacup to his lips, remarking with genuine surprise that the brew is exceptionally delicious, while the lady watches him in disbelief, struggling to process the reality of his presence in her home once again. The conversation shifts to the topic of courtship as he reminds her of her previous declaration regarding her lack of interest in anyone outside of ducal families. He notes that she had claimed not even to know the names or faces of those without such high status. With a sharp gaze, he points out that since she requires a fiancé from a ducal family, the field is significantly narrowed, suggesting that an heir would suffice for her ambition. She affirms this, stating that for a fiancé, such lineage is basically a requirement, conceding that if the Duke himself were available, that would be ideal. Piecing together her logic, The nobleman deduces that her fixation on status is the primary reason she chose Lawless, a man from a ducal house. She blushes deeply, defending her past affections by claiming Brother Lawless was her first love, though he immediately counters this romantic notion. He frames her history as a narrative where the brother she single-mindedly adored since childhood turned out to be an entirely different person than she imagined. She protests, insisting that his character shift wasn't the only reason for the fallout, but he presses on, asking if she truly loved him or if it was entirely about his status. He observes that she cherished her feelings for over 10 years only to discover he was the wrong person, yet she surprisingly did not turn down proposals from other suitors during that time. She averts her gaze, admitting quietly that even when she thinks of Lawless now, she feels no pain in her chest, realizing that her reaction does not feel like heartbreak. She concludes that if she isn't interested in someone, the attachment simply isn't there, asking defensively if it is truly such a terrible thing for status to be a condition for marriage. He watches her closely as she laments her father's lack of status, believing that if her family had held a higher rank, their lives would have been happier. He counters her materialism by asserting that status is merely decoration and expressing disbelief that anyone could find true happiness by being swayed by such superficial things. She argues back, claiming that even if it is just decoration, it is better to have it than not, revealing that her only happy memories are from when she was very little and her family possessed wealth. He questions the implication that she has been miserable ever since, noting that as a count's daughter, she still belongs to the Datar family which once owned vast lands. At this provocation, her composure cracks, and she confesses that the image of her family's wealth was all a fabrication. The atmosphere in the room grows heavy as she reveals the crushing reality she has hidden. Her family is burdened by a huge amount of debt that other nobles could not even begin to repay. She describes this financial ruin as her family's deepest shame, a secret she has never shared with anyone before. Upon hearing this, the nobleman leans in closer, invading her personal space with an intense expression, and tells her that sharing this burden is better than bearing it all alone. He suggests that there might be something he can do to help, creating a moment of unexpected intimacy and support. She begins to recount the tragic history of her parents, explaining that they eloped despite their difference in status, forming what was initially a natural love marriage. However, her father, desperate not to be hated by her mother because of their reduced circumstances, began hosting extravagant parties night after night, spending far beyond their means. He spoiled her mother with luxuries and deluded himself into believing they were a grand count's family, a fantasy that even she, as a child, began to believe. She reflects on the chaotic management of their estate, realizing that if her father was scrambling to repay debts, he likely couldn't manage the territory properly either. The narrative of her family's downfall continues as she explains that her father forced his way into debt, which eventually led to her mother abandoning the house and leaving them behind. She apologizes for sounding pathetic, but he reassures her that no apology is necessary, admitting he had wrongly assumed she was solely chasing status for vanity. She clarifies that the truth is she genuinely needs someone of higher status to survive the financial ruin. She reveals that her father was disowned by her grandfather and was never properly entrusted with the estate's management, meaning he should have inherited the title without issue but failed. The estate they currently occupy is described as merely a fragment of the original territory, a tiny, isolated patch of land they were allowed to keep out of pity, far too small to be worthy of a count's family. She discloses the final blow. The vast majority of their original land ended up going to the Vander family. The nobleman, now identifying the connection, realizes this land is close to the Vander family's current territory and understands why she might have complicated feelings toward them. He mentions that he knows Lawless and that noble society is a small world, asking her if she understands that neither the Vander family nor Lady Lizette is at fault for her family's loss. He scrutinizes her expression, noting that she doesn't look like she has moved on from the loss, suggesting that feelings of resentment might still be smoldering inside her. She reacts with shock, questioning if he is actually acquainted with the Vanders, but he evades a direct answer. He probes deeper, asking if she wants him to apologize, or if she perhaps blames him and her father for everything. He points out a harsh truth. If her father had been better at managing the estate, their situation might be different, a comment that stings her pride. Trying to lighten the mood while delivering a reality check, Lord Edion, as she identifies him, pokes her forehead playfully, telling her not to pout. He warns her that just because a family is a ducal house like Lawless's, it doesn't mean every noble family is swimming in money. He then asks a piercing question: is she planning to have her future husband's family pay off her family's debt? She admits there is no other way, as she must marry someone of high enough status to cover the massive sum. Edion challenges her assumption, asking why she believes relying on a future husband is her only option. He proposes a radical alternative. Why not work to repay the debt herself by enriching her own land? She stares at him in bewilderment, as he points out that since she already holds a title, she has the means to act. He summarizes her current plan bluntly as marrying for money, which leaves her speechless at his directness. She tries to defend herself, stating that working the land is the only thing she can do instead of relying on others, but he interrupts her doubts. He asks if she has ever actually managed land before, and implies that she hasn't. He begins to list the necessary infrastructure projects, such as repairing the rough roads and implementing flood control for the Eastern River, which he recalls has flooded several times. She dismisses these tasks as impossible, but he insists that while it isn't easy, the necessary actions for the territory are obvious. He advises her to utilize her connections with merchants and, rather than starting cultivation from scratch which takes too much time, to use the untouched, wild-growing trees as a base for industry. Edion's vision for her land expands as he suggests having the villagers run businesses, noting that the forests remain rich precisely because poor roads kept people out. He outlines potential products. Depending on the plants, they could be used for dyeing, strong wood could be processed into lumber, and fruits could be turned into food products. He takes another sip of his tea, emphasizing once again that the tea here is especially delicious, noting that he has tasted tea in many places and this stands out. He connects this observation to a business opportunity, mentioning that in the neighboring country, dyed fabrics are currently popular, and even small pieces of cloth could sell like hotcakes. The lady looks at him blankly, unable to follow his rapid strategic thinking. He then focuses entirely on the tea, the quality of which clearly impresses him. When she reveals that the tea simply grows in the backyard, his interest peaks. Deciding to take matters into his own hands, he tells her there is no need to figure it out alone and commands her to come with him. Taking charge, he declares that he will show her the potential of her own land, just this once, as he leads her toward the source of the tea. Edion explains the secret behind the tea's unique profile, revealing that its complexity stems from mixing local herbs with cheap tea leaves to bulk up the supply. He notes that since the servants cultivate these herbs themselves, the estate always possesses an abundant supply. The young lady, stunned by his insight, finally demands to know who he exactly is, unable to reconcile his knowledge with his vague identity. Ignoring her question, Edion presses on with his business proposal, explaining that while investing in the land might initially feel like the debt is increasing, she will soon recoup the costs. He suggests a strategy of combining the herbal tea blends with fruits grown on the domain to create a product that might sell even better. Skepticism clouds her features as she stammers, asking if he is scamming her. She retreats to her original, desperate plan, insisting that her salvation must come from marrying someone of high status, specifically a duke, to pay off the family debts. She characterizes the idea of marrying a random duke as a financial necessity. Edion sighs, noting that she is truly stuck on that singular, grim solution. He dismisses her fear of being swindled, stating flatly that he is not so bored that he would waste his time tricking people with something so dull. She concedes that while the crown prince holds the highest status possible, she wants absolutely nothing to do with him. Edion freezes, his composure cracking slightly as he asks for clarification regarding her stance on the crown prince. She affirms her rejection with a resolute, absolutely not. Trying to salvage the conversation, Edion probes for her reasoning. She recalls hearing that the prince has a fiancée named Lady Felice, a woman rumored to be flawless and incredibly beautiful. Since Lady Felice rarely appears in high society, the young lady has never met her, nor has she met the prince to judge his character personally. However, her moral stance is rigid. She asserts that she hates men who are already taken. She declares she wants nothing to do with a man who flirts with other women while engaged, offering a firm, no thanks, to such a prospect. Edion listens silently as she condemns the act of pursuing someone who is already committed, stating that anyone who gives in to such temptation is awful. A somber expression crosses his face as he agrees with her, likening it to a thief stealing what does not belong to them. The moment is interrupted by his butler, who steps into the garden to announce that it is time to leave. The butler observes that Edion seems slightly off, picking up on the shift in his master's mood. The tranquility of the garden shatters as a man storms onto the scene, shouting furiously. He accuses the young lady of making a fool of him and the house of Viscount Tatar. The intruder, identified as Lawless Badham, screams at her, mistaking her actions for a deliberate insult against his pride. He rages that he sent a proposal letter but received no reply, and claims he was humiliated at the royal castle because of her. The young lady, confused and frightened, realizes a catastrophic error has occurred. She had intended to contact the Duke's son, Lawless, but had mistaken this man for him. She realizes she sent her letter to the wrong residence, the Vis-Aunt Duke's estate, which caused the mix-up. Badam, realizing he was a mistake, becomes enraged that she only cares about the Duke and her father's status, not him. He accuses her of acting high and mighty while mocking him. His verbal abuse escalates into physical aggression as he lunges at her, screaming for her to stop. Just as violence seems inevitable, Edion intervenes, slamming the gate or door shut to separate them. He turns back to the trembling girl, asking if she is hurt. She looks up at him in disbelief, asking if he came back just for her. Edion explains simply that he saw Badam running off and decided to return. For the first time, her heart pounds loudly in her chest, a painful sensation she struggles to understand. She tells herself she should push him away because he is not a suitor and she shouldn't allow this contact, yet she remains frozen. Badam, recovering from the interruption, shouts his title again, declaring he is from the house of Viscount Badam. He looks at Edion and suddenly freezes, recognition dawning on his face as he stammers, "The Crown Pia." Before he can expose Edion's identity, Edion ruthlessly clamps a hand over Badam's mouth, physically silencing him. With a terrifyingly cold glare, Edion commands him to be quiet and states he will not allow another word. Edion turns his attention back to the lady, his voice stern. He demands to know why she tried to protect her butler and face the danger alone instead of running. He admonishes her that she should have asked someone for help. Her expression falters as she admits that in her experience, whenever she was truly in trouble, there was never anyone who actually helped her. Moved by her isolation, Edion makes a solemn vow. If he has even a little time, he will come to visit her. He instructs her to tell him if she is ever in trouble, sealing it as a promise. She is bewildered, wondering why she is accepting such a promise from a man who isn't even a suitor, telling herself it is pointless for him to keep visiting. Later, inside the carriage, Edion's aide remarks that he knows what the prince is going to say. Edion confesses that he simply couldn't leave her alone after seeing what she went through, refusing to turn a blind eye. The aide confirms they have handled the situation by issuing a strict warning to Viscount Badam's son to keep silent. The aide then shifts the conversation formally, addressing him as Prince Edion and reminding him that they must be on their way because his fiancée, Lady Felice, is waiting. Edion offers a wistful, somewhat resigned smile when the aide asks if he agrees. He stares out the window, lost in thought, until his aide prompts him again. The scene shifts to a grand staircase where a woman with long dark hair awaits. She addresses him coldly as Iron Mask, before correcting herself to Edion-sama. With a sharp, possessive gaze, she asks him if he is thinking about another woman. Edion kneels before her, kissing her hand in a gesture of courtly submission and replies, "Of course." The woman, Lady Felice, smiles with a chilling mix of satisfaction and insecurity, demanding that he think only about her and pleading with him not to abandon her. Lisette paces near the estate entrance, her gaze fixed on her elegant, dark-heeled shoes as they scuff against the ground. Her mind replays the image of Edion from their previous encounter, specifically the moment he coolly asked if she would really want him to come again. The memory of his demeanor lingers, causing her to question her own rigid standards. She realizes that when it comes to Edion, she might no longer care about his status. Panic flares within her as she chides herself for abandoning her vow to never settle for anything less than a duke's house, a promise she made to herself long ago. Yet, despite him never having proposed, the mere sound of a carriage approaching sends her rushing toward the gate, her heart betraying her ambition. She acknowledges with a jolt that she is so drawn to Edion that her obsession with rank is crumbling. However, the figure that emerges from the carriage path is not the composed nobleman she awaits, but the disheveled and panting form of Lawless Badam. Lisette halts, her disappointment palpable as she demands to know why he has returned. Lawless, looking frustrated and ragged, accuses her of being tricked. He confronts her about the man she has been inviting into her home and spending time alone with, incredulous that she does not grasp the gravity of the situation. He identifies the man she was with on the day of his previous visit, asking if she truly knows who Edion-sama is. When Lisette remains silent, Lawless drops the revelation. The man is Crown Prince Edion. Lisette stands frozen as Lawless explains that the Crown Prince hardly ever attends evening parties, which is why a debutante like her would not recognize him. Lawless, however, claims to have seen him many times due to his own status within House Badham. Seeing her shock, Lawless clears his throat and proceeds to dismantle her image of Edion. He describes Prince Edion as exceptional since childhood, widely regarded as the perfect future king. But everything changed when he got engaged to Lady Felice. Since then he ceased appearing in public, allegedly leaving his duties to his cousin, Duke Visant, to prioritize time with his fiancée. Lawless emphasizes that Lady Felice is his own cousin. Lawless leans in, his expression twisting into a sneer as he asserts that Edion must be teasing or deceiving her. He drives the point home. The Crown Prince has a fiancée, making his approach toward Lisette utterly strange and suspicious. He attempts to leverage this betrayal to his advantage, insisting that if she had accepted his proposal, none of this heartbreak would have occurred. Lisette reels from the information, her mind struggling to accept that Edion is the Crown Prince and, more devastatingly, that he is engaged to Lady Felice. Lawless issues a final warning, telling her to be grateful he stopped her before she got in too deep, before leaving the scene. Lisette is left trembling, questioning why Edion never told her and agonizing over the fact that he is not a suitor, but an engaged man. Moments later, Edion arrives, immediately sensing the tension. He notices Lisette's distress and asks if the man from before showed up again or did something to her. He reaches for her arm, checking her wrist for injuries, but she flinches and pulls away, stammering a denial. Edion apologizes for his lateness and vows to do his best to keep that man away from her in the future. His concern appears genuine, which only deepens Lisette's internal conflict. She tries to convince herself that Lawless must be mistaken, yet the kindness Edion shows her now feels dangerous. Overwhelmed by the duality of his caring demeanor and the alleged deception, she abruptly excuses herself, claiming she remembered something urgent. She apologizes and retreats into the mansion, leaving Edion standing alone and confused. Inside the safety of the estate, Lisette hides while her butler, Benji, intercepts the prince. Benji lies to Edion, stating that Lady Lisette already has plans for the day and cannot meet him. Edion is visibly taken aback, stammering an apology for the intrusion. He scans the area, asking if the second son of the Badham market is present, suspecting interference. When Benji confirms he is not, Edion resigns himself to leaving but leaves a message. He will come again the day after tomorrow. As Edion departs, Benji returns to Lisette, who is slumped against a wall. Benji gently confronts her, suggesting it might be time she met with him properly. He counters the narrative that Edion is deceiving her, arguing that the prince looked genuinely worried about her and did not appear to be toying with her. Lisette admits she knows this, but his sincerity scares her more than his potential deceit. Benji urges her to ask him straight out if he is Crown Prince Edion. Lisette confesses she already knows the truth of his identity, but she remains paralyzed by the knowledge of his schedule. She notes that he plans to return the day after tomorrow because he has plans for tomorrow, plans she assumes involve being with Lady Felice. Lisette resigns herself to the role of the outsider, acknowledging that, of course, he would put his fiancée first. She rationalizes his visits as mere charity, checking on her out of concern. Yet, tears well in her eyes as she admits she has no right to feel otherwise, despite having already fallen for him so badly. Meanwhile, Edion rides away in his carriage, accompanied by his aide. The aide suggests that Lisette's refusal to meet might be a sign she intends to stop seeing him, proposing that Edion take this opportunity to stop visiting. Edion firmly rejects this, stating he has no intention of stopping. He argues that after seeing her condition, he cannot simply leave her be. The aide presses further, questioning if Lisette's repeated refusals aren't a subtle message for him to stay away. Edion dismisses this, asserting that with her personality, she would tell him directly if she wanted him gone. The aide speculates that perhaps suitors have started returning to her, asking if Edion truly knows everything about her. Edion bristles at the suggestion, but the aide reveals it was merely a hypothetical scenario to keep his superior alert. The aide confirms that capable subordinates are guarding Lisette around the clock and reporting everything, ensuring she is safe. Edion relaxes, expressing relief, though he notes that if she did find a suitor, it would technically be a happy thing for her. The conversation shifts to the following day's schedule. The aide mentions the escort to Felice's estate, noting it is just a quick ride on horseback. Edion becomes visibly agitated. He orders his aide not to accompany him, complaining that with a minder tagging along, he cannot get any time alone with Felice. He instructs the aide to come later, insisting he needs to handle the important talk privately. As Edion looks out the carriage window, his expression hardens with resolve. He declares that he isn't planning to take his time forever, especially now that the wedding date is finally set, signaling that a decisive move is imminent.